listening to the Northern Hunter Podcast, home of all things hunting, fishing, and outdoors in Alaska.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. My name is James Payne, and I'm very excited for this episode. I've got Chris Perez as my co-host, and we are all very blessed to be sitting down with Gale Vick. Thank you so much for coming in this evening.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very, very excited to get to talk to you about the salmon issues that we're encountering here in Alaska and getting your in-depth knowledge on this topic, because we've talked about this a lot on the show. Whenever a new update comes out and hits the tabloids, you could say,
right.
You know, we try to put out our opinions, but you work with this stuff all the time and have a long history with it. So we're going to get some facts today, and I'm stoked.
I hope so.
Right? Just say it with confidence, and then we'll
just
know. Exactly. Now, I got acquainted with you through the Fairbanks advisory board meetings here, and the fishing, what do they call it? The Fishing Game AC.
Yeah. Right.
And you've been a part of that for quite a while now.
I have.
I started attending a few years back, and I've heard you talk on this subject quite a bit, those meetings as well. Why don't you quickly give a little bit of a idea of what you do?
For the Fairbanks AC, I chair the Fisheries subcommittee.
Gotcha. Yep.
So pretty much everything fishy goes through us. And we typically will start in the fall after hunting season. And I think October 12th is the first subcommittee meeting, and that's on a Monday. And then 2 days later on a Wednesday, the second Wednesday of every month during the winter, we have the full AC meeting. So we do the fisheries subcommittee first. And we also have a game side, and Mark Richards is the chair of that side.
Another great guy.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, no. And that's awesome. And for anybody listening, I mean, if you're in the Fairbanks area or really any community of size here in Alaska, there is an AC that represents you as the people. And they're free to attend. You can attend online or in person. And it's great to get, commitment from the community, because that's what the whole process is really.
It is.
You know,
it is. Yeah.
It's like the first layer of government almost, like, so, but yeah, keep up to date. You can get, I love seeing all those emails. I wish I could attend more than I have in the past, but.
Well, they are recorded, and you get the information from the Board of Fish website that has all the ACs around the state, and it'll tell you when the meetings are and the links to the meetings. The fisheries subcommittee is always by Zoom, but the AC meetings are both. They're hybrid.
Gotcha. Yep.
And they're right now we're still doing them at the J.P. Jones Center in Fairbanks, and people are always welcome to come. We usually have a good crowd, and we talk a lot about real important issues for people. So.
Yeah. No. And I believe Mark was the one that told me, he's like, hanging out at these meetings, you'll learn more about hunting than in the outdoors in general than anywhere else, because it really is like just a sounding board for anyone in the audience, where they're just listening to all the educated minds, going back and forth on these issues, and what are the causes, and what are the solutions, and what do we do, what do we recommend. Right. It's a great thing to listen in on. I recommend it to everybody.
Yeah. So. ACs are designed to be advisory to the Board of Fish, to the Department of Fish and Game, the Board of Fish mainly. And so we get first crack at proposals that we have for the region, and we do commentary on any proposal in any region if we feel it's relevant. And the Fairbanks AC is known to have a very strong voice in the state.
Yeah. I can tell that just sitting in the audience.
Not always a happy one.
Right. Well, it's not always a happy topic. So
right.
That's
right.
But no, it's a great thing. And I'm very glad I was able to connect with you through that. And it's a great place to connect with a lot of great people, honestly.
It is. And it is good learning. And thank you for joining us, because we really need to get, a lot of us old codgers, we really need to get a younger voice in there. There's a few of us been around for a long time.
Well, I can tell you what, I'm going to be clearing a lot of my schedule this winter just to make it to those, because I missed more than I wanted to last winter, and I felt bad. I felt very bad. I was there digitally most of the time.
Yeah, this is true, right?
But yeah. But yeah, so we're in this episode going to talk about the issues plaguing the salmon in this state, somewhat specifically for the king salmon along the Yukon River, and then also on a larger scale, like the statewide, and kind of what the bigger causes are from an inside perspective from yourself. So I'm very excited for that.
Just to give you a little more background on that from my side, I run a Zoom meeting every Thursday morning for the Bristol Bay AYK, entire AYK.
Oh, awesome.
We go to actually Chignik and North Aleutians and down sometimes in Catchment Bay, and we actually cover a lot of fishery issues. That was an outgrowth of the Area M meeting for the Board of Fish back in February of 2023. And we've got scientists and attorneys and fishermen and tribal leaders and all kinds of people. It's an invitational only, non-agency. So we do strategic planning, but it's a very, very large group. And that is the discussion arena that we have, similar to the AC structure, but we're non-regulatory. So we just talk about issues and we bring people in. And,
big brainstorming area.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, that's awesome. So everybody listening, definitely tune into that too if you can. So
it is invitational.
Yes.
So somebody can contact me.
There you go.
And the only reason we do that is because we just want to keep it to the issues that are relevant to the AYK, and agency people are invited, but only on special reasons. And I mean, it's obvious why we're doing it that way. We want to work with everybody. That's not the issue. It's just that we need to have a forum for discussing the important issues.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and it's important to keep the right people there because otherwise it can get convoluted very quickly. I'd imagine.
It does anyway, but
avoid some infiltration there.
Right. Very different at the AC, which is a public process and it's wide open, you know. So when we have a hot issue at the AC, we very often get people who are upset with our position. And I appreciate that. I listen in, offer your opinion. Everybody's welcome to do that. So.
And I've noticed that even with the people that can only attend on the digital screen, you know, remotely, they'll normally open up a section for anybody there to speak as well. You know, and there's a little hand raise button on Zoom and all that you can do. Right. So it's not like you're participating any less if you can't be there in person. So it's a really cool setup.
It is. Yeah. It is.
But before we get into the issues with salmon, just a little story time here.
We're going to get into the non-issues with
salmon. The non-issues, exactly. Still salmon related. So Chris and I told you about this before the recording, but Chris and I went down and cleaned house on some Copper River Reds. And it was a grueling but very fun experience.
Good for you guys.
It was the typical Chitina madness that you experience. And, you know, everybody hears about it. Just the absolute bomber run.
We picked a good time of year to go do it, though.
Oh, we did. Yeah. You know, we hadn't gone down for the earlier runs, which, you know, a lot of people are down there catching June and July and catching the earlier runs of Reds. Just through different means and different reasons, we were tied up and weren't able to make those. But Wednesday of last week, Chris hits me up, and I just remember it's all of a sudden the late run is in, and it is on fire down there. Everybody's posting, everybody's catching fish, and it was just like go time. And I'm sitting there, I travel for work. I have plane tickets that are non-refundable most of the time. You know, sometimes I can pick up and go. Sometimes I got dedications, and so I wasn't able to jump immediately on the option, and I was just praying that by the time I got down there, the run was still going, because you hear all the time it can change in a matter of hours.
It can.
Yeah. And it's a 6-hour drive just one way there. So it could be hot when I leave town and be dead when I show up.
It's a 7-hour plus drive right now with all the road construction.
Oh my goodness, dude.
That's That's about what I documented.
Yeah.
I liked the fact that I drove there late on my way in because all that was done with for the most part.
Same here. When I
caught it on the way out when I was wiped out.
Well, the longest part for me was the road into Chitna. Because they were redoing that as well. I was sitting at that one for a long, long time.
Yeah.
There's those two stretches, one like by Delta and one by Glen Allen.
Yeah.
Those ones, they weren't too terrible during the day when I hit them on the way back, but same thing on the way down, just because of the time, it was wide open when we were driving.
I caught every bit of it on the way back.
Yeah, me too.
Did you catch those big trucks out of the...
Oh, the new Gold Ore trucks?
Oh,
yeah. A couple of those too, for sure.
I've been dealing with those all summer. So for my job, we service the villages. And the eastern part of the state down there is where we spend a lot of our spring.
Oh,
we kind of move across the state throughout the year. And this spring, I was driving down towards Tok and beyond, and Mentasta and Tetlin and all of those different areas. And those trucks are, when they say every 10 minutes, they mean it.
Yeah.
I mean, and what sucks about the construction zones is then you get like 3 of them stacked up back to back.
Oh my goodness.
And they're double length.
Yeah. You can't pass them.
No, you've got 3 trucks and 6 trailers to pass,
Right.
You're just kind of stuck, and, they got GPSs
Strap
in our vehicles.
In. Right.
If the vehicle wasn't GPSed, maybe I could pass them.
I wasn't passing with a 4-wheeler on a trailer.
No. I'm kidding. Be safe out there, people. But so you left before I did, Chris. So why don't you?
Yeah, it was my wife's birthday.
Yeah.
So it was funny too. She just wanted me to get out of here. She was like, I was like, yeah. I was like, I want to spend time with you. She's like, no, I want you to go get fish. She's like, and I'm like,
smart woman.
You're not serious. And she's like, no, I want you to go get fish. She's like, we can figure out the hanging out thing later.
Yeah.
She's like, she's like, if it's on, you need to go right now. So I'm like packing. You and I are chatting.
Yep.
And I tried to stick it out all day with her, and she was like, hey, if you don't get out of here, you're not getting down there till like early morning tomorrow.
Yeah.
So finally she's like, you need to go. And so I skedaddled ahead of you.
Yep. I was still at work out in the Ville somewhere.
I ended up getting down in there and that's the other thing, it was socked in going down there. It's really foggy, super socked in. It was kind of a sketchy drive once it started getting a little darker. But I got in there about midnight, right before, dropped all my stuff.
Yeah.
Got set up to go to bed and I was like, I'm going to go see what's going on down there. So went down, had this big plan to run down to like Haley Creek. I was going to recon a bunch of stuff before James got there because I had the lead on him.
Yep.
And then I sat up, I crossed that footbridge, sat up on the top there and kind of did some recon. And I was like, I'm going to see if I can't get this done right here. So went down and got it done like immediately, like 50 minutes. I remember the 50-minute mark. I needed like 10 more fish. And I was like, no way. So dark. It was kind of a little bit like sleety or drizzly. And it was awesome. I've never seen it like that.
Yeah.
I got 2 scoops with 6 fish. So I caught the one with 6 fish right on the bank. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. And then it was like lots of 2s, lots of 3s. And then I had another one that was like 6 fish. And I think I actually lost some out of that batch. And like I was pulling it in. I lost like 2 out of that. But I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Like it was so good. I don't think I've ever seen it like that.
Yeah.
And not to say that it's not like that often, because I have buddies that come back with awesome success stories, but
that water was low.
I've never had it.
Yeah, the water level makes a huge difference.
Yeah, well, and you can really target them too.
And
really
also sun. They go in deeper when it's sunny.
Yeah, that was actually our exact experience because I showed up the next morning, and we can go into a whole lot on that, but I fished during the day. Literally less than 12 hours after what he's talking about. And they were still hitting good. We limited out, but it took us a lot longer to limit out, and they were further away from the bank. Where he was fishing, you were saying that they were like, you only had one attachment on your net.
Yeah, well, I had the 2 6-foot attachments, and then I have a longer net that I bring. I bring a lot of gear just in case.
No, it's good.
I mean, I got 3 dip nets in the back with 3 different configurations.
No, you need that.
When you're that far away from a store, there's no replacements.
And spare nets. I bring spare nets and all that, and parts, but I've always traditionally fished at night when I dip net, which is really like unorthodox.
We did too.
Really?
Always at night. Right?
That's cool. I don't hear this a lot, and because of what you're saying about the sunlight and stuff. And I actually did, like, once we get down the road here in the weeds, I want to talk to you about that, because I was talking to a biologist about that at one point, and they said that that's due to like predatory pressure from like birds and bears and stuff. Is that correct?
Well, that's part of it, and part of it is they can see better. They can see the net, when it's lighter and clear in the water. Of course, that's a glacial river, but when the water's lower, and fish typically will, when the sun's out, they'll typically go lower. And they do that in the salt all the time. I don't know how much consistency there is in the river, but they do on the salt.
What prompts that movement at night? Because it always seems like at night they're much more mobile. They seem to be almost, that run picks up as it gets dark. It seems.
That's a great question, and I would say on the river, it probably has to do with just circumstances at the moment, and I'm not sure predators have that much to do with it because they're moving pretty fast.
Right.
But it might just have more to do with what the conditions are that they. I don't know.
Yeah,
that's a good one. I just know that that we did better at night. All the time.
And that's always been my experience too.
And when I commercially fished on the salt, it was always you do better when it's raining out, and we know that because then the fish, because in the salt the water's clear.
Right.
And the fish can see the nets. So.
As I grew up bass fishing a lot, and my buddy and I we ran together. It's thick as thieves. But it was funny at our home lake. You'd start raining, just that hard, torrential downpour, and we'd be pumped, and everyone would be clearing off the lake. It would be like, time for a top water, and we'd throw the top water on and get the top water bite going, or like a buzz bait, and we would just catch so many bass in those rainstorms. And it seemed like the fish would rise a little more, and but I've always said, I've kind of geared my fishing, my time off and stuff to evenings and nights when it comes to dip netting, and everyone's like, "You're nuts! You're out there on the copper at night." But I'm like, whatever. I don't push the safety limits, but
sure. And like the spot that you and I were fishing, there was not really much danger there. We weren't on the rocks.
You could go in right there and lose your footing.
You could,
and we've done stuff like that.
Yeah,
I had that situation with that buddy last year, like in a spot about that calm where he went down on his butt and he was down the river a ways.
Oh yeah,
but
I mean, you've got to be careful still, obviously. But what I was getting at is we weren't like hanging off of a rope and doing all the crazy acrobatics and everything like that. So it was for the copper. It's about as safe as you're going to get doing what we were doing. Because the water was so low, we were just able to get out there, and you're just standing. You're
makes a huge difference on the water level.
Right? Yeah, you still got to watch your footing. I mean, I tripped a bunch, combing the beach the way I was and everything. But I just started clearing the rocks out. I made myself a little runway. I got myself moving.
It's funny. I was rinsing my fish off after I got my limit, and I just had I had my jeans on and my extra tufts, and I threw my rain gear on over that. And I was just so excited, when you're just stoked and you're not paying attention and just not thinking. And I got down on one knee to rinse my fish off. I'm like, man, my foot's getting cold. And I realized my whole extra tuft's just filling up with water.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, well, I'm in it. And I'm like, whatever. I'm done. So it doesn't matter. I'm not going to be out here tomorrow.
Right.
Well, so I wanted to point out, it's hilarious. So you keyed into this fact super quick, walking in here and spending a little bit of time with us two yahoos, but pointing out, that I'm ADD. And this guy's definitely
we haven't really diagnosed it yet.
We compete to see who's higher on the spectrum. We'll just say that. So
well, like understands like. So
I'm slower. I remember less. No, you don't.
But so we get on Groove, right? And we'll just update each other like repeated, like we won't even know the whole story, and we're sending updates just to keep it flowing, right?
Right.
And so he gets down there, and he had texted me before he left cell service, and then we both have inReaches, and we stay in contact with inReach, and so he inReached me when he gets there, and he's like, "Dude, it's crap. Like it's no good. Like everybody's saying the fishing's no good."
And you're reading his signal.
And I'm like,
I'm not even fazed by that.
I know.
Because I'm like, nope, not acceptable.
But then in true fashion, yeah, he's like, I'm going to go down there and check it out myself. An hour later, like almost to the dot, I can show you on my phone. He's hitting me up saying, "Limited out. Get down here, bro." And I'm like, I love your description of this is crap. Like, even earlier this year, you were like, I don't know, bear season's not going so good with 2 6-foot plus bears. And you're just like, dude, I love your descriptions of what's not good. Like, it gives me hope.
You know this guy.
Chris says it's terrible. We need to pack up.
I know.
We need to go. We need to get out there.
That's the code word. Go, go, go.
Right. He doesn't know when he says this. It's the best.
But
oh man.
But no, yeah, we were quick behind him. So as he was giving us updates, like I was on the road before he lost cell phone service, so we were communicating everything. I had worked the full day Friday. This is the true Chitna bomb run, right?
Yeah.
I had to come into the studio and do some work for the episode that released last Monday with Mo, and I left here at 10. Went home, packed up all of our stuff, loaded the wheeler, got everything strapped down, and we were out of there by 12:05 a.m. heading south.
Wow.
And pulled an all-nighter. I didn't drive the entire time. I drove us to Summit, and then my wife jumped in and drove a little ways, and then I think she got us to Glen Allen, and then I jumped in from there. But it was, like you said, Chris, socked in like crazy. And it's amazing driving. I drive a lot, long distances for my job. And in the summertime, you get so used to being able to see.
Right.
And
right.
You lose your night.
You forget vision. When it's August and overcast and raining, and that rain just soaks up all that.
What is this dark business, right?
Exactly. I was so nervous. Like I'm just like
I was so out of practice the other night.
I know. It was insane. I'm like I'm not looking forward to this for the next 6 months. This is not going to be fun. But then you get used to it.
You
get your night eyes. But
you get the snow, and that's a good reflector.
It is.
Yeah.
It makes
the darkest time
difference.
of year is in September when there's no snow on the ground.
Yeah,
that's a great point.
Well, and the rain just seems to soak up all your headlights. Like they mean nothing.
It does. Right.
And so we experienced that down to about, I would say, almost a Kastner Glacier. It was just completely socked in.
Wow.
And actually between Delta and Kastner, it was so foggy.
That's because it was so hot. And then you got the rain and it just created that fog.
Yeah.
Pulled everything down.
I was driving 20 miles an hour at one point because I'm like, if there's a moose 30 feet in front of my truck, I'm not going to see it. But we persisted. The horrors persist, but so do I. And we got down there, I want to say around 6:30 was when we pulled into Chitna.
AM.
Yeah. Full run. No sleep, no nothing.
Adrenaline.
Yeah. Just the sheer desire to get the salmon, right? So and then we met up with you along the trail there.
You guys actually caught me driving. I was warming up.
Yeah. After
I was like, I got to run this truck. I slept in the back seat of the truck, and I was like, I woke up and I was like, I am cold. And I looked, it was like, you had just sent me a message. You were like, we're in Glen Allen or something. I was like, cool, I'm going to go on a little drive, heat this truck up, go back, lay down. I come to get back to my little campsite. I'm passing James.
Yep. And then we just proceeded to go to work. That was it, and because the last thing you want to do is go all that way and then be like, you know what, I'm tired.
Yeah.
I want to sleep a little bit, wake up, and the run's done.
Right.
Like, so
when it's hot, you catch a fish.
Yep. Make hay while the sun's shining. So we dove right in and got set up. Chris went down there and start showing us what worked for him the night before and getting us set up. And I made one pass and caught a fish. And I was like, oh, this is going to be good. Because the last year when I went down there, the water was so high. Like, there almost wasn't an other side of the bridge. Like, it was very high waters the last time I was down there. I was in my waders trying to get out just towards the current.
Yeah, I heard a lot of people got really skunked because of high water.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
And so this year when I pulled up and the water was low and you could see all the sandbars in the middle popping up, I got excited. And it was a good fishing day. We had lots of success. Sporadically though, not pulling in 6 at a time like he was during the nighttime. But it was consistent. Every 20 minutes there was a fish and something like that. And we posted a little video of like what we were doing, and everything, getting the fish out of the net and my wife putting it on the stringer and me going back to dipping and everything. And it was just a blast. And, there were other people along the bank there. They were catching fish and it was just a great time. And that was kind of the one thing, like the people that were down there, it was like not combat fishing whatsoever. Like everybody was kind, everybody was cool. People were coming up and be like, "Hey, great job," and like
I never go before August.
Yeah,
I used to do that. I used to get all gung ho and like, I'm gonna get my fish in June. I'm gonna get my fish. That stuff is for the birds.
Yeah,
I had an old timer I work for, and he goes, "August is when you dip net." I'm like, "What?"
Yeah,
and he goes, "Oh yeah," and I'm like, "There's fish in Chitna in August?" He's like, and he just looks at me. He's like, "Are you new?"
Yeah, right.
And I'm like, "Sir, are you serious?" He's like, He's like, "I don't even think I've ever been to Chitna before June." And he was like, before August." He goes, "That's when you fish."
We used to go down twice when the boys were little, and we'd go down earlier to get the kings because then we could fish kings then. And of course, you can't do that now. But well, I mean, in Chitna this year you could up until they closed them.
Yeah,
and there's a story associated with that too. But go ahead.
We'll get into all.
Yeah,
that,
we will.
Sure. Yeah. But no, it was a good time. We caught our limit around 3:15 p.m. So it was a full work day of fishing. 8-hour shift, just no lunch break, and you're just walking that beach, and and that was a big difference. Was I noticed between the people that were catching fish and the people that weren't was the ability to just stick to it for long enough,
right,
and adapt. Because at first, when I first pulled up, I only had the one attachment on there, just like you did, right? Onto that net. The one 6 foot length, and caught onesies and twosies, and then we decided, okay, they must be farther out. Throw that second one on there, and then sure enough, there was that ledge right there where you drop off the ledge, and all of a sudden, every time I would stretch out far enough to get over that ledge, fish would hit the net.
The crazy thing is that water had dropped like another 2 feet from the night before. It was so crazy the way it was falling. Yeah. And you could see that high water line.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was low. And it was funny because I took James and his wife I said, "Follow me. We're going to go right to where I was at."
Yep.
And I'm like, I pull up. I could see all the tail clippings everywhere. And I'm like, wait a minute. And I'm looking around and I'm like, wait. And I'm looking at this little rock that I was standing in front of. I kept putting my left foot on. And I'm like, that's 3-4 feet back. And I'm like, well, anyway, I was right here somewhere.
Wow.
And then that ledge was like really
that was the ticket right there. And the thing is, like, like I said, with the neighbors all being real nice on the river there, we'd all share information and like, oh, where are you catching? Where are you doing this? And like the people that were wanting to catch fish, started doing what worked, and they're catching fish too. And I mean, all the way along that whole bank. And it was a really great experience. And then we got back up to the O'Brien Creek Bridge and cleaned out all of our fish, and that took a long time too. But we learned some lessons on equipment we want to bring next year.
You always do.
Like it does seem that way. Like no matter what you're doing, you're always going to learn.
And I don't care how many years you've been doing it, you can always learn something new.
But like just ways to speed things up and get things moving and whatnot. Because one of my big mistakes this year was me and my buddy, he was down there as well, and we were processing on a plastic table. And they were just sliding all over the place. And that alone slowed me down a ton, And so I was like, okay, well, I've seen the guys bring in that little turf section. I was like,
right.
That's the ticket. That's why I'm doing that next year. Like, and, it's just, it was a lot of fun. But so we got done processing fish. We made it back into town just in time to catch the food truck before it closed, and got a nice hot meal.
Good.
And my wife did the calculations after, when we got the tent set up and everything, and we were going to go to sleep, and found out we'd been awake for 40 hours straight.
Oh my goodness. Good thing you're young.
Good thing we love each other.
Yeah, there's that too.
There were a few moments there. No, just kidding. No.
Yeah, fishing and building a house can really test your.
You know what's so crazy? It was funny because James and his wife, they're funny to watch. They get along good, and you could tell they're always like, they're just always having fun, getting into the adventure. And I could tell they were tired, so I got a little sleep. And I'm like, man, you guys have been at it. And they're like, it was funny. I'm showing James, like, yeah, I'm standing here. And like his wife walks over to one side, and he's like, I think you should stand over there. She's like, I want to stand over here because I want to watch. And like, they got a little like, and I looked at James, and I'm like, some of the best spats me and my wife have gotten in is doing this.
Yep.
And the other one is tearing my house apart.
Right.
Yep.
I told the guy, I remember I was doing Florida at a guy's house. We had like ripped our house apart to do some stuff. And he's like, how's it going, young man? And I said, pretty rough.
Yeah, you don't want to ask.
And he goes, well, what's going on? And I said, my wife and I were doing like a remodel. And he's like, that's amazing. And he goes, you guys getting into it? I'm like, oh yeah. I'm like, we're going at it tooth and nail. And he looks at me and goes, only time I've ever thought about divorcing my wife is when we were blessed with a remodel.
Yep.
I went home and told my wife that. We were like cracking up about it. It's so stressful.
Oh, it is huge.
Yeah.
And then like, I'm a contractor, and I always like see this stuff. I see couples, and you can just see it's testing their patience. And I always kind of give that little like unsolicited advice because I can like see the tension. I'm like, hey, just so you guys know, everybody deals with this.
Yeah.
I see this all the time, and
Right.
sometimes we'll get the whatever, and you'll get like, really, we're not the only ones. Like, no, you guys are just being normal.
You'd be abnormal if you didn't go through that.
And that was
and even building a house, because we used to be contractors for about 25 years. And,
oh yeah.
Yeah, and you talk with people and they wanted to change everything, and they always wanted to do it after you got the windows in. No, we want the window over here. Well, this is a little problematic.
Right.
Real problematic.
This isn't a couch.
Yeah, exactly.
6 inches that way.
Right.
You have a header there now.
Right.
No. Well, and the funniest part was with this fishing trip is we would have our spats, and we would just go to war over the dumbest stuff.
Oh, sure.
But then 30 seconds later, it's like, bing.
Yeah.
Back in it and just totally forget what we were even arguing about, whatever it was. And it's just back
like going
to
through
fun.
labor, You may not relate to that, but I certainly do.
I was never experienced, but I can imagine though.
You can forget about it right away, but when you're in it, boy, I'm ready to kill.
No, but it was a great time. She's an absolute trooper. She stayed right there by my side the entire time, helping put the fish on the stringer and gill them out and everything like that.
That's good team building.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it was really, and that's the best thing about having someone that's on the same train as you as far as wanting to get the fish, wanting to live this lifestyle.
That is huge thing.
Yeah, and it's
good for her.
Yeah, no, she might even be a little bit more into it than I am.
My wife and I, we just laugh like it's crazy. I thought about it after the fact, but we came home and we got a little routine. We set everything up, vacuum packer and clean water and the ice water and the whole gig and our whole little process that we do. And I remember the other day I was watching her. She's just cruising, just vacuum packing fish, and we're joking, laughing. We got the tunes going and Adigan's jumping in the puddle. I sent you that video and I'm like, man, I am so blessed. This is a life. And
it is.
And I sat and I thought about it. I'm like, I remember the first time we did fish, we just went to war. We didn't have anything we needed.
Yeah.
Well, that's because you don't know what you're doing, and you're frustrated, right?
Yeah.
And then like now I'm like, and I told her, I said, this is funner than catching them. And we just laughing the whole time.
Yep.
Okay, do you want me to do my tip now?
Yes. Because I struggled. One of the biggest things I struggled with was with the vacuum sealer is that fish slime gumming up, and it wouldn't do a good seal. I kept having to mess with it. And you speaking of tips for next year.
Well, I commercially fished in the Sound, Prince William Sound, for 21 years. And you're allowed a home pack, you know. So when the reds were good, or a king, we got a nice king, we'd come home after an opener, and same kind of deal like going to Chittenden. You're dead tired. You've been up for 36, 48 hours, whatever. And you're just slimy and you're tired and you've got to take care of these fish.
Yeah.
You know, so typical deal. We'd go out and get the holes out in the lawn, get the coolers out with the ice water and the whole 9 thing. But here's the tip about when you fillet a fish is fillet it, wash it down real quick, and then set it up on a tray and have butcher paper layer. So you layer your fillets on a tray. You can have 6 or 7 layers, and you freeze it for 12 to 24 hours in the freezer. Not vacuum packed, not anything. Just layered under these, because that sets it up and it kills the enzymes, or stops the enzymes for a while for creating that slime. So then when you go to vacuum pack it, you don't get near the gumming that you do.
Yeah.
So
that's really cool.
That I am using that tip next year.
So you don't cover it or anything.
You layer it with butcher paper
and just set it like into your chest freezer.
And in the chest or the upper, whatever you have, you know. And you can stack them up quite a bit. You know, you don't want to stack them up too high because of the pressure on the meat. But you stack them up, and then the top layer, of course, is covered as well with butcher paper. And just let it sit in the freezer like that. And it's not going to freezer burn or anything like that. It's just going to. It doesn't have the time. It's going to set up.
Yeah. So. Well, and even the stuff that we vacuum packed, I checked it the next day. You know, almost 24 hours later, and it was still pliable. It was frozen-ish. You know, it was on its way, but it wasn't there yet. So 12 to 24 hours.
When you're putting a lot of fish in the freezer, it takes a long time for that to freeze. Unless some people have, you know, a flash freezer, which is the professional one, and those are very pricey.
They are.
Yeah, but I do know people who have those. And
when we do that, Sam moves all that around. She'll go out like every 2 hours, and she'll just move it around so that it's getting exposure.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. Like she'll flip it, and she'll she's constantly moving it instead of just stacking it all in there and then walking away and cool.
Well, you can just leave them alone, because the one thing you don't want to do is break a seal.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So you want to be really careful never to break the seal, because if you break the seal, you got to start all over again.
Right. Well, and Madeline and I had a pretty good system going for the vacuum packing section, where she would lay them down on some paper towel and just start wiping them down, get all that slime off as best she could. But even doing that, there was still so much slime left on the fish that when I would put them into the vacuum seal bags and I would try to vacuum it, it would seal off the bag too soon because of the slime. And then it would start trying to seal the bag without a full vacuum yet.
Right.
And so I was fighting it. I was getting wet paper towels and having to wipe the inside of the bags off after putting the fillets in there and trying to get them to seal properly and everything like that.
And you can waste a lot of bags that way.
Yeah.
Something that we do too is, I don't know if you saw in the little video I sent you. So I'll do a 8-foot sheet of plywood on 2 sawhorses, and I'll screw both sides down, and I screw a little chunk down off to the side for her, like a little working table where she'll put all her bags, her pre-made bags and all that.
Yep.
And then what I'll do is I'll take towels, like big beach towels or whatever you got, and then I'll pull them out of the ice water, rinse them in clean ice water, and that ice water, almost kind of like ice, like you throw in your soft drink or whatever. There's enough abrasion in that ice and that water. I'll rinse them off in there, and then what I do is I throw them up on those towels and I cut them, and then I slide them over to her, and you almost eliminate that factor too. But I want to incorporate your idea into all that too.
You can do both, and then you really have a nice dry seal.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
To a new level.
Yeah.
And then what I'll do is I'll take a 5-gallon bucket of water in the middle of all that and just rinse that off again.
You have to.
And then I'll just throw those. I'll just start doing them again. And those towels are done by the time you're done.
Oh yeah.
I mean, we're talking cheap towels. Don't do your nice towels, but they're done.
Not your wife's favorite bath towel.
Well, don't leave them to hang out to dry, because the birds will be on it immediately.
Yeah. No, it was an absolute blast. I think I was weighing everything as we put it in the freezer. I think we ended up with, what did I say, Chris? I think it was 87.8 pounds or something like that.
Nice.
So yeah, it was a good amount of fish.
That'll be good eating.
Yeah. And we keep almost everything.
Yeah.
And actually, had I been of a little bit clearer mind and not awake for 40 hours, I would have kept everything, absolutely everything. But we keep the heads and the collars and vacuum seal those as well.
What do you do with them?
So the collars, my wife, she'll cook them up either in the oven or sometimes on a cast iron, and then she doesn't ever tell me what seasonings she uses or anything like that. I think because she knows I'll tell people. But but whatever magic she works, she can work some magic with cooking. So, but then with the heads, she has a stash of those for just fish head soup.
Yeah, fish head soup. Right.
Yep, and especially we're
chowder, good chowder stuff.
Yep. And we're working on expanding the Payne family. And when that happens, the nutrients that drains out of your body during pregnancy and everything,
right?
That the nutrients that are in the fish heads is like everything you need to replenish. So the eyes and the skin and the bone and everything. And so she's really keeping a stash of that for in that event, because she had a friend that through her pregnancy didn't replenish those nutrients and started having eye trouble, and like her vision started deteriorating and stuff. And so she's kind of got that little stash. That's hers for
that's pretty cool
for postpartum.
Do you cook with the eggs too? Like you,
so we kept all of the roe that we got, and she was eating it, like just snacking on it while we were processing the fish and everything like that, just straight out of the fish.
Good for her.
Whole sack down the hatch.
I like this lady.
Oh yeah, you'll have to meet her. Yeah. Whole sack right down the hatch, man. Just no second thoughts.
Yeah.
And then the rest of it, what we didn't eat during the processing, we did freeze. So
they're good with scrambled eggs or something, because it's sujiko. It's a the red eggs are in the skein, but they're really good to put into scrambled eggs or something like that.
I'll have to try that.
Or even soup.
Yep. Yeah. And you know what? I figured if nothing else, if we don't end up eating them ourselves, good bait to get more fish.
They are good bait.
Yeah. Use a resource to get more resource.
Yeah.
So.
I always brine them and put them on a tray and then vacuum seal those. And then you got... And eggs are expensive.
Oh, yes, they are.
Buying roe for fishing.
Yeah. Well, use the Procure on it. We used to do that quite a bit.
Oh,
I just put like the krill oil in there and like doctor them up and do all that stuff that really doesn't matter.
But it matters to you, so it's important.
Well, the nice thing about Procure is it really makes the eggs bright. So, if you use them for bait, if you've got a feeder fish, then they'll.
I love that Procure. It's cool.
Yeah.
I always like to run them out on the trays, and then I'll let them sit and I'll let them get really dry to kind of get them to get that.
Except that it leaves a pink trail everywhere. Watch. Our driveway is always pink after that.
It's crazy too, because it smells really good.
Yeah.
It's like a really pleasant. Growing up, we used that. You'd buy that back home down south, and we'd fish for trout with that stuff. And so now I like make it, and it gives me those little like childhood memories. I'm like, I remember this stench.
Yep. Right. But the only thing we threw back was the tails and the spine.
Good for you. That is a good role model. Good for you.
Yep, that's nose to tail.
At this point in time, salmon being so precious, don't waste anything.
Yeah.
And also, like you guys are doing, when you process it properly, then you don't have the waste in the freezer or anywhere else.
Yeah.
And if you're at fish camp, what we used to do is we cut it up and brine it and stuff like that, and then you can everything.
Right. Right. Yeah, because then you don't need refrigeration or any of that.
But the best cans were the ones you pickle the fish first, and then and then you can't. Oh my gosh, that's just heavenly. And then of course the fish strips. I so miss the kingfish strips. Miss those.
Well, you want to know a fun one we did night of. We camped in Chittenden that night. Woke up the next day. All of our fish was in gallon bags on ice. We packed up camp and booked it home as soon as we could, and then vacuum sealed everything and got it all processed that night. My wife popped all of the hearts out of the collar and the head and fried them up on a cast iron.
Nice.
With I want to say it was moose tallow. And so moose tallow. It had to have been 20 salmon hearts
Nice.
in the base of this pan,
Yeah.
and it was delicious.
An hors d'oeuvre.
Oh, it tasted like red meat. It wasn't fishy at all.
Yeah,
It was
right,
just,
right.
it was so good. I was expecting, I mean, it's the heart, right? You would think
Right.
but it was just like a bite of red meat. It was so good. Like that's a new
I've
must.
never done that all these years. I'm going to try that.
Oh,
yeah.
highly recommend.
Yeah.
She mixed it. It was the fish hearts and then odd cuts of belly meat.
Uh-huh.
And so you had the fat and the oils and everything in there. And then,
the belly meat we've done quite, salmon bellies are great. But...
Yeah.
I always smoke those.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
They're perfect strips for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
My son, that you met earlier, he loves smoked salmon.
Good for him.
It's super cool because
Good
I'm like,
for him.
he's not going to eat this stuff. And I think I lied to him one time. I was like, oh, it's like candy. And he's like, oh,
it is like candy.
Then he just started like,
yeah.
And then next thing I know, he's just eating all our smoked salmon. I'm like, hey, what are you doing?
Leave some for me, kid.
Yeah.
That's a fun thing too, is like do that with him. Brine it and do all that. It's like a science project, right?
Of course it is. Yeah.
And then you check on it, and then it's funny too. He always wants to check on it early. He's like, "Daddy, we need to go check on this." I'm like, "No, we just checked on it. You gotta leave it alone." But it's fun to watch him get all excited about it.
Oh, that's terrific.
It brings a lot of joy to the house. That's for sure.
Yeah.
It's such a cool thing that we have access to here.
Oh, it is absolutely. But no, it was a great experience, a great time. So I highly recommend everybody try it. And
the one thing I want to add to the conversation is that, as we know, there's only two things in Alaska that are for Alaskans only.
Yes.
And that's subsistence and personal use.
Yes.
And subsistence has the priority. Personal use should be next. We don't do that, but we should.
Right.
And that's one of the things that we try to work on at the AC. We support the Chitna Dip Netters Association. I want to give them a shout out because they do tremendous work. And protecting the rights of the personal use fishermen.
Yeah.
So there aren't very, now with the pressures on declining salmon stocks, the Copper River is, one of the few places you can still get salmon runs.
Right.
Yeah, and reds on the Kenai as well. But our fish are running smaller. So just even when they have run strength, they're still running smaller. And that's the issue to talk about later.
I noticed that a lot.
Yeah.
I was kind of as I was getting them, I was sifting through and I'm like, man, they're really not that big. And then you get some of those big stragglers. And I was like, and I started thinking back, I'm like, I remember when it used to just be all these big reds, and but
well, and that's we talk a lot on the show about hunters standing up for hunters' rights, and obviously fishermen standing up for fishermen's rights.
Exactly.
Supporting an organization like the Chip and Dip Netters Association is a huge thing.
It is. It is huge. I recommend that anybody who fishes at Chitna should be a member.
Yeah.
And support what they do because they really are on top of those things.
Yep. And that's the best way to protect your rights is to be involved. Get involved with the groups that are involved.
It is because we're feeding Alaskans.
Yeah.
And that's the big issue right there.
Exists. So let's take a break and then we'll talk more about salmon.
Okay.
Hammer Bullets produces what we at the Northern Hunter consider to be the most premium and best working monolithic bullets on the market today. These bullets are easy to load, extremely accurate, and best of all, they're always in stock and ready to ship. The guys at Hammer designed them so that after penetrating the hide of an animal, it sheds its petals, initiating a massive energy dump while retaining the rear shank for maximum penetration. These bullets are built with 100% focus on how they perform on game, and their proprietary designs produce great BCs with specialized pressure grooves for amazing inherent accuracy and speed. They have a minimum expansion velocity of 1,800 feet per second, which allows for long-range shots, but with no maximum velocity, making them perfect for every cartridge from your granddaddy's old 30-30 to the high-velocity round like the Weatherby 3378 without having to worry about your bullet failing. To view their expansive selection and find the perfect match for your hunting needs, go to hammerbullets.com and use discount code TheNorthernHunter to drop the hammer on your next adventure.
All right. So before we get too carried away in the salmon discussion, why don't you give the folks listening a little background to who you are, how how long you've been in Alaska and kind of what led you into working with the fisheries and conservation aspect of everything and getting as involved as you are.
Sure. Well, I was born in 1947 in Syracuse, New York. My dad was a Norwegian immigrant, but he was conscripted in the U.S. Navy, so he fought in World War II. And my mother worked for the Department of Defense, and she was Scottish and American Indian. And so then I grew up on Long Island, and there was a stock market crash in 1963. So my dad he had an ad business in Manhattan, very typical. And so we moved out to the Midwest, and my dad bought a bunch of land, and one summer I went up to work on some horses for that, and met my future husband. He was a farm kid, and Wisconsin farm kid, and then he was in college, and when he graduated in 1968, he was offered a job up in Alaska teaching.
Oh.
And, they go around recruiting. That was when Alaska had that one school district thing for all the village schools. It was before Molly Hooch. And so he was offered a job, and we came up with his sister and her husband, and in 1968, and never left. So I was in education for a while, and then in 1977, I went back to school, and I also started working for Tanana Chiefs Conference. That was when they were first organized under ANCSA. And so I was one of the original directors there. And
Gotcha.
And then I worked there for 7 years, and I got offered a job in Kotzebue. And in the meantime, I am running the school up there, the technical school, the adult technical school. And but we had 2 sons, and we had a dog team, ran dogs for 25 years out at Salcha and on Chena Hot Springs. And the boys grew up running dogs. And
Awesome.
when I got offered the job in Kotzebue, it was with a caveat that I would be flying back and forth every weekend mostly, and I'd have the summers off.
Oh, wow.
So Alaska Airlines got to know me pretty well.
Right.
And then, of course, then you have to go through Anchorage, and then you had to go back up to Fairbanks. So, so then I came back to Fairbanks. I got really tired of commuting that way, and came back to Fairbanks, and unfortunately got a divorce, and we're it's been a long time coming. And so I moved to Anchorage, and some people who had known me in Fairbanks saw me at a Research Development Council meeting and said, "We need to talk to you." And I said, "Okay." And they wanted me to work for the At-Sea Processors Association that were the big trawlers out in the Bering Sea, and for training, because I was an educator, and they wanted me to design and run their training programs. And so I was kind of, when you go through a divorce and you move, and a lot of my boys were growing, and a lot of things happening in my life, and so I said, sure. I tried it, and that got me right in the middle of fishing.
Yep.
And baptism by fire, and
that's about as in the middle as you can get.
Yeah, pretty much. So that was 1991, and I started my own business, and I've been doing that ever since 91. So I've done pretty much everything on the federal side and the state side, and it has nothing to do with fish. I've been involved in it, and I was a council junkie for 30 plus years, and
yeah,
and I was actually a candidate for the council twice as a backup, and then I was also on the in the science part of it, and I ran an organization of 45 communities in the Gulf of Alaska for quite a long time on halibut and issues, and a lot of fisheries issues at halibut at the time. And so I was also on the Prince William Sound Science Center board. I did that for 9 years in Cordova. And then I was simultaneously on the North Pacific Research Board. I was one of the founding persons in that. So I chaired their advisory panel for a number of years. And so my boys used to say to me, "Mom, when are you moving back to Alaska?" Because I was living in Anchorage.
Right.
So So my partner at the time, he got quite ill and he died, and I moved back to Fairbanks, and very, very happy to do that. I was just delighted to move back, and that was in 2009. I was so happy, and so over the years, I was very fortunate. We lived on Campbell Lake in Anchorage, and I got to fly around. We had planes in the family, and I also flew because of my job. And so I flew all over the state. I've been all over the state. I've done a lot of sports fishing all over the state in different places. And I, of course, have been thick in the fishing world. But it wasn't until I moved back to Fairbanks that when I was younger, my husband and I and the family, we had a fish wheel in the town on river. So that was back in the 70s.
Yeah.
And then I also had friends who had fish camp all along the Yukon, and I'm still friends with them.
Right.
And so we spent a lot of time at fish camp and with our fish wheel and at Chitina. And but when I came back to Fairbanks, I wanted to really get involved with the big issues that were facing the Yukon. And Tanana Chiefs called me and asked me to do some work for them on the disaster relief that was going on at the time. And so we developed a platform for addressing the issues that at the time we didn't know were going to be as big as they are.
Sure.
And that was the beginning of our awareness that, I mean, a lot of us knew for a very long time we were in trouble, but we didn't know how much trouble.
Right.
So I simultaneously got to know a lot of the chief scientists in the Pacific Northwest and in Canada. And I work with them still today. So I trust their judgment immensely. and they put me on the right path. And so that's kind of how I got into all this.
Gotcha.
And working with Canada, working with the tribes along the Yukon River.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, no, I mean, then both of those are been heavily affected by what's going on with the salmon there.
Everybody is.
Yeah.
And we're just ground zero. We're just the coal mine, or the canary in the coal mine, basically.
Right.
Because what's happening right now with Chinook salmon especially is that's all over the state. We're finding out that this is statewide, is actually a Pacific Northwest issue.
Really?
And we have our theories as to why.
Yeah. I've always wondered that if it was a species-wide thing or if it was kind of more just certain fisheries or tributaries.
Well, during this process of getting involved, I was also working with a group of scientists out of Santa Barbara and UC Santa Barbara, and they were scientists from Alaska too. And there's a group of us. It was called the SASAP, which is State of Alaska People and Salmon and People.
Okay.
And it's a really good group, and you can go to their website and get a lot of great information. And we did a paper on the salmon size decline, and it was published in 2020 in Nature magazine, and it was sort of the lead to many subsequent papers on theories about salmon size decline. And we were focusing on sockeye in Bristol Bay because that's where we had the numbers.
Right.
And the problem with a lot of the work that everybody wants to do is that you just can't get the data because we don't have it consistent data. So we found out that, there was a significant decline in sockeye salmon sizes, but subsequently we also found out Chinook was experiencing a much bigger decline.
Gotcha.
And the Yukon River is down about 20%, or probably more now in their average size. I would say it's closer to 50%.
Really?
If you start, and here's the issue. The issue is that the year class is declining. We used to get 8 and 7 and 6-year-olds, and now our dominant year class is 5-year-olds.
Gotcha.
And smaller fish means what? Smaller eggs.
Yep.
Less fecundity. So we're in this spiral downward where we're getting smaller fish and less productive fish. And the run strength has really gone down. The last 5 years we're down to levels, especially in our tributaries, where we're probably not going to be able to save them for a while. It'll be take 100 years before they build back up if they're unmolested. And the problem is they're not unmolested.
Yeah. Which, that's a big, part of what a lot of people blame. But so what timeline would you say everybody noticed that? I mean, so you said, back in the 70s and whatnot, you were running fish wheels and fish camps were running strong. And then in like 2009, when you came back, is when you were starting to work with this. Like,
it was startling.
At what point in between that did they start noticing the decline?
I think a lot of people noticed the decline earlier, but there was it was just anecdotal.
Sure, yeah.
And what we did notice, of course, was we have a treaty with Canada on the Yukon River. And at the Eagle we have what is called an IMIG right now. It's an interim management escapement goal. And that goal hadn't, in later years, hadn't been reached we had a range of like 42,500 to 55,000 was our range.
Mm-hmm.
And we hadn't been meeting that goal. And so the Canadians were real concerned. And the Canadians are extraordinarily polite when it comes to like Yukon River panel meetings or something like that. Well, I mean, honest,
in Canadian fashion.
In Canadian fashion.
Hey, bud, you got any more of them salmons over there?
Yeah, you might want to think about talking to the Alaska side, So the Alaska side pretty much dominated everything. First of all, fish come into the river in Alaska first.
Sure.
Yeah. And so the Canadians were very tolerant, even though Canada they've known for 25 years how bad the situation is.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. And a lot of the villages, like in Tetlin, which is one of the headwater villages, they've been flying fish in from British Columbia because they're not getting fish returning to their spawning grounds.
Mm-hmm.
And they've known this for a very long time. So it's been a real crisis in Canada, in the Yukon territories.
Okay. So this is a different Tetlin than the village by Tok, right?
Teslin.
Okay,
Thank
gotcha.
You.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
I do that all the time.
That's a northern Yukon territory, right?
It's actually southern Yukon territory. It's just north of British Columbia.
Oh, okay.
They have that lodge there, and you kind of go over that bridge, and there's the lodge on the right, and the mechanic shop on the left there.
There you go.
They have such a good breakfast there. Oh, my goodness.
They actually do. My son used to make that trip all the time.
I've done that drive so many times.
Right.
But they have that really, what's cool too? They have that neat, I don't know, it's like that little museum in that lodge. And there's all the cool like taxidermy work, and it kind of talks about the different species.
It's been years since I've been there, so I can't say that with verity.
And I'm not gonna say any names, but like some of these places where you have these exhibits, the taxidermy work is really bad. Right? It's
careful. I know a lot of people in Tetlin, so I'm not gonna.
Theirs is really good. It's beautiful.
Good.
It's awesome and
good. Good.
Anyway, I took my wife there when we were driving through there. I was like, I'll show you something cool. And she's like, have you ever looked at this little exhibit deal? And I'm like, there's an exhibit there. We went back there. Yeah, it's some really neat taxidermy work. It shows all the different species of Alaska.
I will look at that.
It's really cool.
Throwback to our earlier conversation. Have you ever stopped at the Taslina General Store on the way back? It's between Glen Allen and Pippin Lake.
Yeah.
Yes.
They have a bunch of taxidermy in there.
They do.
Yeah.
Some great stuff in there.
Yeah.
I think I was too hungry to look up the last time I was in there.
They got African animals, Alaskan animals, like all kinds of stuff.
That's
neat. I think they have a cougar. It's cool.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Yeah. Nice stuff.
Anyway, total side tangent. But you were saying they were getting fish blown in.
Yeah, and so the Canadians have been warning us for a very long time. Of course,
Gotcha.
Typical Alaskan style, we've been totally blowing it off, ignoring it. Seriously, we were. and oh no, everything's fine, and we have the best managed fisheries in the world, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
And so subsequently now we're in serious dire straits, and it's not just our main stem into Canada, because 50% on average of the Chinook entering the river are going to be Canadian fish.
Mm-hmm.
The others are Alaskan fish going into tributaries.
Gotcha.
And Chinook and Salcha are big contributors.
Mm-hmm.
And they used to contribute as much as 15% or more into the Alaskan side.
Wow.
Now we're down to less than 1%, maybe.
Really?
Yeah, we're in bad shape in the China and Salcha for two separate reasons. In the China, it likely has to do with a lot of what we call red pipes, which are not salmon friendly culverts in the upper Chino.
Oh, yep. Yeah. Okay.
Because they were good for the time when they were put in.
Mm-hmm.
But that's been many years, 20, 25 years now. And so we're looking at that issue because all over the state, there was a lot of federal money put into replacing salmon culverts, and people are doing it kind of quietly.
Mm-hmm.
They're doing it on the highway now, on the parks.
Yeah.
$1 million a pipe.
What?
Big cement pipes. So, I mean, that's the DOT number. Yeah, I'm doing a story, paper on this. So I need to verify that. I will be talking, and I'm sure there's variables in there, but
sure, yeah.
the point of the matter is these aren't cheap.
Yeah, no kidding.
And this relates, the reason I'm doing the paper is because, I don't know if you guys know this, but the proposed Ambler Road had about 3,000 stream crossings.
Mm-hmm.
You start multiplying pipes on that and see what you come up with. Yeah. We're talking billions of dollars.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's a story to be researched.
Right. Yeah.
And to go forward with it.
Jeez.
So that's a big reason for a lot of I've noticed a lot of that construction going on.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously. So
yeah, right. Right. That's one of the reasons, right?
Gotcha.
And they're doing this also on down in the Copper River area. They're replacing a bunch of pipes.
Mm-hmm.
And they're doing quite a few places around the state, but it's still not going to be enough. I mean, we've got ancient pipes and we have tons of salmon streams. And
so, what's the issue with the old culverts? They just can't get through them, or they can't?
They're too small, and they get debris up pretty bad, and they freeze up. But they're also, when the water gets low, it's not a flow, and the salmon can't get in, or it can't get out, and the adult salmon have a hard time getting in.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of issues that are related to
yeah.
bad culverts, but most of it has to do with poor maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
And water flow.
Gotcha.
So anyway, that's a whole story by itself. We're learning a lot about it all over in the Pacific Northwest. They're going through the same thing.
Mm.
But we have particular problems up here because of our winters.
I can imagine. Yeah.
So that's the China, and the Salcha is more has to do with riparian habitat. And I know there's groups that are meeting with landowners there and talking about, being careful with the reds, the salmon beds, spawning beds,
mm-hmm.
and being careful with creating dams where they shouldn't be created.
Oh yeah.
I mean, just a variety of things, and cutting down shade. Salmon like shade in the spawning areas. And
there's personal cabins around their spawning grounds.
A lot.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's an education issue, I
Sure.
think. And I haven't been involved with it so much as I was at one time. I was on the Dano Valley Watershed Association board, and they came out with some really good publications about that.
Mm-hmm.
But those are the urban area spawning, there's quite a few.
Right.
Urban area. You have most of our spawning areas, of course, are rural.
Yeah.
The Andreevsky River contributes a lot for sockeye. The Anvik River contributes, up until recently, a huge amount of summer chum. But their numbers are way down to less than 10% for summer chum.
No kidding.
No kidding. And the Kayakuk River has both Chinook and chum. And then north of the rapids, you get into the fall chum drainage, and the Tjendrik and the few rivers like that are big fall chum.
Yeah.
And porcupine. But all those numbers are down. And so this year we had a small harvestable surplus for summer chum that we identified, and ADF&G did. And there was a limited opportunity for fishing. People did get summer chum, not using their gill nets, or they could use gill nets like a beach seine, and they could use dip nets. No drift nets, no in-river drift nets.
Right.
So the gear was managed by openers depending on the passage of the summer chum. And so in districts 1, 2, 3, and up to 4, people were able to get summer chum. Beyond that, they don't get it because the chum peel off into the Tanana, and so people that are above the rapids they have to depend on fall chum, and this year there was not a harvestable surplus. The numbers were way down. So
even for chum, huh?
even for chum.
Wow.
Right? Well, actually, and that's one of the reasons that many of the groups are working on bycatch issues in the Bering Sea for both Chinook and chum. We have an amendment for Chinook, but we don't for chum yet.
Gotcha.
And so that's and then we have this new but this new agreement with Canada under the treaty, calling for a 7-year moratorium on Chinook. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but that's likely going to be a lot longer than 7 years.
Yeah.
And that is not a happy thing to say. Since Chinook is such a valuable food source and cultural resource,
right?
It's devastating. It's devastating to everybody,
right?
But I do want to emphasize that we're all in this together. I mean, we're all part of the reasons for the decline in some respects from years past practices that we all contributed to, myself included, and that was because we didn't have the knowledge we had, and we also thought, even listening to elders who were telling us that, these runs will come and go, and we knew that from statistics, but they always recovered. They always bounced back. Now they're not doing that.
Yeah, and I mean, we've talked a lot on the show in regards to hunting and population management of big game. That the one contributing factor to the game populations that we chase is us.
Yeah,
right, the big difference when you'd hear about the influx and the decline in caribou numbers. The herds just fluctuate; they're just cyclical.
Yeah,
like
they do.
But that was prior to thousands of hunters going after them at some different capacities.
There's a law of diminishing returns.
Exactly. Yeah. And so we got to take ourselves into account.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
And that's the same with salmon. More people putting more pressure on and then we have bycatch and we have intercept. And we have hatcheries. Yeah. So, I mean, there are many, many reasons for salmon decline. Some of them are bigger than others, they're higher up on the impact scale. But human intervention and management is right at the top. Climate change is definitely is an issue, but we put way too much emphasis on climate change when we really have management issues.
Yeah.
And we're trying to face up to them. And that's the long haul story.
Yeah.
But we're each going to have to be involved in helping salmon. And this is an important aspect here. We're each involved in helping salmon rebuild. But the river can't do it alone. And right now, people on the river are paying the biggest burden. There's no question.
Sure, yeah. I mean, how long has it been since they've been able to fish?
For Chinook?
Yeah.
Oh,
years.
Several years. Yeah. And we haven't had any commercial fishing since 2009 for Chinook. And probably should never have had any commercial fishing for Chinook.
Right. Yeah.
But
hindsight's 2020.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And that's just the increase in numbers, and then but think of a salmon we call it gravel to gravel now. That's the new buzzword. Think of a salmon from a spawning bed, becoming a smolt, wintering over and becoming a smolt and going down the river out into the ocean, and has to survive the estuary and all the predators that on the way, and all the the percentages of dropout. And then growing up in the ocean and having it, depending on the species, like if a Chinook is the oldest and goes the farthest. So they go out, and some of them even go through the False Pass and back again. And so they have to run the gauntlet of all the human interaction, all the predators, all the bycatch, all the intercept.
They get it the harshest.
They do.
Yeah.
They do. And mainly because they're also an important sports species. We also have a lot of pressure on Chinook from killer whales, for instance.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're seeing an increase in our killer whale population. And so there's a lot of speculation that that's making a big dent. And But that's just one thing.
Right. Well, and I get the opinion listening to, the possible differences, because everybody has their opinion on what's causing it. You hear, oh, well, we've got foreign ships that are just running the edge of the international waters, taking all of our fish, and then you've got, the bycatch issue, and then you've got the natural die-off issues. You've got that paper you sent me earlier about the parasites. Yeah. But I get the opinion, or I get the impression, I should say, that it's not one issue, it's a conglomerate of issues.
It's a cumulative.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
It's not just one issue that you can point to and say this is the culprit. We can't do that yet. We're not there. I mean, the AC group, because we talk with all the scientists in the Pacific Northwest, we feel very strongly that hatchery production in the Bering Sea. Alaska is the highest producer of pink salmon in the world. And that's primarily out of the Gulf of Alaska, but they do migrate. And then in the Bering Sea, we have a lot of Asian. We have Russian and Korean and Japanese, Chinese, mostly Russian and Korean and Japanese. Japanese for chum in the lower part of the Bering Sea, and then in the upper part, it's mostly Russian. And they produce a lot of pinks and a lot of chum. And they are almost doubling or tripling their output in the next few years, which is very scary to us.
Wow.
But we can't go to the State Department, because that's an international deal, and we say, well, let's try to talk with the Russians. Right now, you can't talk to Russians. Right?
We don't like them very much right now.
Well, I'm hesitant to say that. It's their government we don't like. It's not the Russians. Because there are actually some very, very good Russian scientists that we've worked with. But because we have to clean up our own act in Alaska, and the Fairbanks AC is out there being very vocal about that, and we've gotten a lot of pushback, as you can imagine, from the hatchery people from the state, saying, no, we're not the problem, and what are you trying to do? You're trying to kill an industry.
Right.
Okay, so here's what we can't manage by. I mean, we manage to our commercial fishing industry. That's how the state manages, not to subsistence, not to personal use or sports. It's all to commercial. And so our escapement goals, all of that has to do with commercial, even though subsistence is the priority.
Allegedly,
exactly, right. And that's a low abundance of priorities. So that means if nobody else gets to fish, subsistence will be the last one that doesn't get to fish. So allegedly. So that usually kind of works that way, but it doesn't. We don't manage that way. That's the problem. And so we have a lot of management issues that we need to look at and to say to ourselves, do we want to save our wild salmon? That's our big mantra. If we want to save wild salmon, we can't pretend that hatchery fish are wild. They're not. They're not.
Right.
And our hatchery production is mostly pink salmon, because it's a 2-year cycle, and some chum. Actually, chum is the biggest one in Southeast.
Gotcha.
And those two, we have a lot of issues. They're straying into wild streams, and they're taking over wild streams.
Oh.
But the biggest thing, Dr. Gregor Garoni out of Washington State is one of the bigger scientists on this, and Dr. Daniel Schindler, we work with both of them, and there's a bunch at University of Alaska. And I want to give a shout out to Dr. Peter Wesley, and and a few others there, and Dr. Curry Cunningham. The issue is that in Dr. Garoni's papers is that we have too many pinks in the ocean that are eating up the groceries.
Yeah.
And it's a complicated issue because salmon eat different things,
Mm-hmm.
and they eat at different trophic levels, and they have different run timings. So none of this is simple. You can say that's the cause, and we believe that from the science we're getting, independent science, by the way. But we're at the point right now where we should be saying to all the hatchery people, and we are saying this to them, prove that this is not the case. Prove that there is no harm. The burden of proof has to be on you guys.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And because right now, the AYK, like I said before, is the canary in the coal mine, but this is spreading. And it's spreading very rapidly. So you better pay attention to what's really affecting the growth of fish out in the ocean. And when we keep pumping in more and more hatchery fish in with Russia coming online, it's scary what's going to happen out there.
Well, and that's it's just mind blowing to me thus far. I mean, just how much worse it is than I thought it was when we started this recording.
Yeah, I don't mean to be a doomsdayer, but honestly, this is the situation.
Well, and it's important to
we need real information too, not hearsay, and everyone's has an opinion.
Yeah. Because all you ever hear about is the kings, and it's just the kings and the kings in the Yukon. But then, you'll hear about like in Chitna or just the Copper River in general. They closed kings on the copper.
They did, and we're going to be addressing that.
Yeah, and then you'll hear about, well, you can still get kings in Southeast, and then they closed that too at some point, and then like just all these different...
The sports fishing around for kings has been closed in most places around Alaska for sports.
Yeah.
Definitely on the Kenai. And until a few years ago, that was where you got the giant kings, and that was the icon, for sports fishing. But on the Copper River, the issue that we're going to be addressing at this meeting in December is the river was closed down. They closed down the king fishing, and there were almost 9,000 commercially kings that were caught and going that were Copper River kings. And so we're working on an issue at the Board of Fish to equalize that out a little bit, so that the first two openers for the Copper River commercial fishing, and that was my old fishery. I'm very familiar with that one. But the first two openers, because they start May 15th, are usually without knowledge of what's going over the sonar. Because
gotcha.
Yeah. So once we start figuring out the numbers, this goes back to escapement goals that we were talking about prior to this recording. We are running kind of blind for those first two. So we have to kind of equalize it out so that we're sharing the wealth a little bit.
Sure. Yeah.
But all of it, especially in Prince William Sound, it's all about the economics. And that's what I was trying to say earlier when we were to save wild fish. We have to stop saying, well, we have to do this because of the economics. No, you want to kill a resource, you start first with the resource.
Right.
What is best for the resource?
Because it's going to go away anyways.
It's going to go away.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of time.
Yeah.
Yep.
So what was the... Go to a little bit of backstory on those fisheries. I mean, what was the intent when they started producing salmon to pump out into the ocean?
That is a wonderful question.
Did they think it was going? Did they think this was the magical fish? Like, the magical process is, we'll just add more.
It started. It was 1975. We started with hatcheries, and there's a paper or book that's going to come out. I hope before too long about the history of this. But it was started out of Cordova, and at that time we were in a real down cycle with wild fish, which happens. It's like caribou.
Sure.
I mean, we have serious down cycles. We don't know why, but that's very fish and caribou are cyclic, and so they looked at that and they said, well, if we want a steady, dependable economy for Cordova, then we have to look at a way to even out the odd years, when the fish were really down.
Right.
Because salmon, pink salmon are a 2-year cycle. And so when you have an even odd year, it makes a huge difference in the numbers, both wild and hatchery salmon.
Right.
So that's, and we didn't know anything about hatcheries at the time. I mean, hatcheries were in the Pacific Northwest, but that was even before the Pacific Northwest knew maybe this is not such a great idea. So, I mean, a lot of studies have happened in those intervening 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
So here we are. And I don't want to fault anybody for wanting to do that. We didn't know at the time.
Right.
And up until even 10, 15 years ago, we didn't know all that much. We're just finding out stuff now.
Mm-hmm.
It just takes a heck of a long time for that to circle around so that you know what's affecting one thing is affecting another. We're in an ecosystem here.
Right. Yeah.
And I wouldn't even care. I think most of us wouldn't even care about any of that if it weren't affecting our wild fish.
Right.
If it weren't displacing our wild fish, because that was not the intent of the hatcheries in the beginning. And they'll say it in all of their Regional Aquaculture Association bulletins. It's all right there. And that's in the state law. It's in all the regs.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there's so many regs that affect hatcheries. It really is. It's a very complicated system.
Yeah.
But we put a lot of money into it too.
Oh, I can only imagine.
The hatcheries are PMP hatcheries are private nonprofit. That's what PMP stands for. And they will say, no, we pay for our own weight. That isn't true. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Fish and Game. You're going to not like me for saying this. I got a lot of good buddies there. But
call them out.
And actually, some of them agree with me. But I'm not trying. We're not trying to lay blame here. We're trying to fix the problem.
Sure. Yeah.
And all of us need to work together to be honest about that problem. So when we go to Board of Fish, we need the department to be honest about independent research, not just the in-house research.
Mm-hmm.
They need to say, okay, we will value independent research like we do our own.
Yeah.
Because otherwise they're just preaching to the choir and they're keeping it. And I think we're cracking that door a little bit now. I hope we are, but it's a long haul. And it does affect people. I mean, I fished hatcheries for 21 years.
Right.
I fished chum on the western side. Over at Esther Island and all that area. And I know that if somebody had said to me at the time that this isn't, there are impacts there, I would have said, no, there isn't any impacts there. What are you talking about?
Right. Yeah. Well, and that is a huge back and forth between this argument, especially along the Yukon communities, right? Is because they're not able to fish for their salmon.
Right.
But then, and that really affects them culturally and
it's devastating. And I can't even tell you the food security issue is huge.
Yeah. And I talk to people, I'm all up and down the Yukon for my job all the time. And every time I'm in the village, it's a topic to be brought up is, just the impact that's having on them. And then on the flip side of that, you've got these coastal regions where their whole economy is also fish.
Yep.
And so you've got both sides fighting for that lifestyle. And, it's a really high tension thing.
It's a very high tension. And it's very, and then you have the upriver, downriver situation because of the way the fish come in.
Mm-hmm.
And there are no easy answers on this. There aren't.
Right.
We're trying to, we do have a food distribution program that it's kind of piecemeal right now. And it's coming, different people are supporting it. And we're talking about millions of dollars in the summertime now to replace some of that food and fly it in so people get salmon. And it's not always a happy situation because food distribution depends on a lot of logistics and including what you have available on the ground to take care of things when the fish come in. So we're trying to figure all this out because this is going to be a long-term problem. And but the big issue is that not just securing food for river communities, but also solving the problem on the high seas. When I say high seas, I mean inside Alaskan waters, but inside the 200-mile limit. which is the EEZ, the Exclusive Economic Zone. And so we've just got a lot that we have to be talking about. And we are talking about it, and we're trying to address a lot of different factors all at one time. And there are no easy answers, because if we're doing bycatch on the Bering Sea, and I want to emphasize that a lot of people really want to say bycatch is the boogeyman. Those numbers don't bear out. I mean, the numbers of Chinook and chum that are coming into the Yukon River are not from the bycatch data, are not huge. I mean, they're significant, but they're not huge.
Right.
We have more, I think, greater numbers coming out of Area M intercept than we do out of. To me, that's a greater problem.
And where is Area M?
Down in the Aleutians. It's False Pass. It's the big pass that comes through from the Gulf of Alaska into the Bering Sea.
Gotcha.
And that was what started our AYK group. We were down at the Board of Fish meeting. We had hundreds of people there, and testifying. And it's a real political nightmare and a logistical nightmare. And we were able to get some restrictions, not like we wanted to, but we were able to get some that made a difference, because at one time there was over 2 million chum. This is about chum salmon. There were over 2 million chum taken out of the False Pass area not that long ago. And then in the June fishery, which is the big one, there was over 1 million chum taken out. Now, this last season, we were down to less than 500,000. So,
wow.
But that's still very significant.
Oh, sure. I mean, that's not a small number either way.
No.
I mean,
although it goes different places. It's not all AYK fish. But so, like I said, all of this is complicated.
Yep.
And one thing affects another. But we have to look at ourselves and say, do we want to save our wild fish?
Right.
And here's another element. As an old fisherman, I know that we didn't care if it was a hatchery fish or a wild fish. A fish was a fish to us.
Right.
It was a money fish,
Yep, that's a paycheck.
It's a paycheck.
Yeah.
Right. It paid the bills. We didn't care where it came from. And that is an attitude that you're going to see a lot. And so there are a lot of, especially the younger fishermen, the older ones, maybe not so much, but the younger guys, well, what's the big deal? Get rid of all the wild fish and we have.
Right.
Well, the Pacific Northwest has found out that doesn't work that way. Eventually you'll have a diminishing returns on hatchery fish.
And the fisheries fish don't go upstreams, correct?
No.
Yeah.
No, they go right back to the hatchery. And what they do is they go to an area called the Special Harvest Area, which is an SHA. And that's every aquaculture association. There's several of them in the Gulf. And they each hatchery has its own SHA, each individual hatchery. And there's several hatcheries within an aquaculture region. And so the hatcheries will contract with a few seiners. These are not common property fishermen. These are seiners that contract directly for a fixed price, and they will clean up what they call cost recovery. They will clean, every hatchery is allowed X number percentage of the common property fish that comes back to the hatchery for two things. They have to have the eggs replaced. They have the egg replaced, and that goes directly at the hatchery. The hatchery takes those fish first. Then secondly, the cost recovery fish are sold to a processor just like common property fishermen do. But that money goes directly for operations to the hatchery.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and that's all built into the system.
Kind of the cycle of the nonprofit system.
Exactly.
Yeah, I gotcha.
But that does take, those fish go back to that SHA, which is right in front of the hatchery. And that's
like Allison Point, for instance. Is that kind of what's going on there?
I don't know so much about that one, but
okay, yeah.
But where's Allison Point?
Valdez.
Oh, you're talking about VDA. Yeah, yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I know it by a different name. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay, yeah. How they're all just congregating right there.
Yeah,
gotcha.
Yeah.
Yep.
And there are some wild pink streams that are associated with all of these regional areas. They have both wild and hatchery pinks.
Okay.
And they have wild and hatchery chum. But Chinook are very hard to propagate. And they do it at a couple of southeast hatcheries, but not in big numbers. It's mainly for this complicated relationship with the sports fishery down there. It's not made for the commercial fishery, but most of the commercial hatchery are going to be pink and chum. Few exceptions for coho, but not very much.
Gotcha.
So pinks are 2-year cycle, and here's the deal: both for pink and chum, the money's in the roe. There's very little money in the flesh.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
No, I never guessed.
Yeah, the real money for both pink and chum is in the roe.
I know my wife had mentioned when I'd mentioned we were saving the roe on all of our copper reds, and she had mentioned something about the price.
Mm-hmm.
You know what people would pay for this?
That's right. That's exactly.
I've never looked into it personally, but
well, it depends on how it's processed.
Sure, yeah.
And everybody's got a magic process recipe. When the Japanese came in to work with the CDQs down in Southwest Alaska, and they were partnered with them, some of the Japanese ships, they brought in their own personnel to do the secret recipe for the roe. You don't share that recipe.
Really?
No, because the Japanese are very discerning about their roe.
Right, of course.
And even in America, if you go and look up roe prices, they'll vary a lot. It'll depend on species and how it's processed.
Okay. So at this point of the game, the fisheries basically exist simply for the harvest of the commercial harvest,
right? Not
as a means of necessarily fixing the issues we're seeing.
Well,
because that was a confusion I had early on, was whether they were trying to fix the issues or if they were trying to just provide fish.
I don't want to be that black and white.
Sure. Yeah.
I think there are lots of really good people in the agencies, both in NOAA and in ADF&G and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Really good people who are trying to fix the problem or address the problem. Then there's a lot of people in those agencies that are kind of old school, and they haven't gotten out of that yet. I don't think. I'll give them that credit. And they are more interested. They're more interested in the economics impact.
Yeah.
Or they're trying to balance the economic impact. Let's put it that way.
Sure.
And there are no devious people working on. It's just a matter of who's being honest and who's addressing it. It's like talking to people in your family. Sometimes they'll tell you part of the truth, but not the whole truth.
Right,
so
right.
When you're talking with your grandchildren, right? Well, Grandma,
So let me ask you this then. You're president for a day, and you could make the call on what they did. What would your opinion be?
Oh, nobody's going to like this.
We say stuff people don't like attention all the time.
That's all you had to say. Let me put these jelly beans down.
I would do two things. I would have a hatchery close down plan. It has to be a plan over time.
Sure, yeah.
I would do that. And then the second thing I would do is to really have a good think tank on how we're looking at the wild salmon protection and how we're managing with keeping in mind the commercial aspect of it. Just really have a good, long audit, basically, of what we're doing and how we're doing it. Because I think people are doing things without thinking that is what they're doing.
Right.
But
well, and I mean, in a sense, I mean, it's got to be kind of risky if they're manufacturing the resource that they're, relying on for their economy.
Right.
Because at some point, that's gonna
here's
come to a head.
Here's another kicker. Almost 50% of our harvesters for common property are non-resident, and that we can't. This is a limited entry program.
Yep.
And it's interstate. So we cannot discriminate between resident and non-resident. So we can't say we're going to shut down the fishery. If I could do that, I would say shut it down just for Alaskans only. And then those Alaskans only could make a decent living on the wild salmon.
Right, right.
We can't do that.
how do we change that?
Yeah, I know. I don't think there's an answer. We've looked at that 9 ways to Sunday.
No offense, lower 48, but
yeah, and a lot of lawsuits. There was a lawsuit early on that said, nope, interstate fishery, you have to have interstate commerce, and that's the way it is. Yeah. So we lost that right out of the chute.
What's that look like from, like, 20,000 feet if the hatcheries did shut down for whatever reason, right? Like, to the economies. I mean, if all there was wild salmon, like.
Well, it would. That's a very good question, because our limited entry is, while we have a fixed number of permits per region and per sector, that doesn't. Some boats are very high, are highliners, and they get the lion's share of the catch.
Mm-hmm.
And some, just they're scratch fishermen. They have it. The Commercial Fisheries Entry Commission does this in quartiles, so you can go to any of the sectors, regions, and look at the quartiles, and you can see who's got the money in fishing, who doesn't. Not by name necessarily, but by sector. And so it would be the real issue would be to the fishing communities on the coast. But here is, I battled this for 20 years, and when we did halibut and sablefish, which is black cod, IFQs, the individual fishing quotas. And what happened when we did that? We called that rationalization. We created a quota system. We called it rationalization. We were doing it with crab. We're doing it with other species as well.
Mm-hmm.
And when we started it with halibut, years and years ago, and it started out of Kodiak, we discovered right away that this is kicking out the wheel, so to speak, underneath the local small boat fleet that depended on being able to fish crab, halibut, salmon. They would just rotate according to the season and so they could make a decent living.
Sure.
And a lot of our communities did that, And we started rationalizing fisheries, both in the mostly federal side. We kicked out that opportunity because those small boats couldn't afford those quota. And they didn't qualify for enough. And the ones that did were forced to sell because they couldn't fish them. And I mean, you've got a multi-species fishing boat, and you can only have a single gear on that boat at any one time for what you're fishing.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're fishing salmon, you can only have salmon gear on there that you're allowed under your permit.
Gotcha.
You can't be fishing halibut at the same time.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So you have to
pick and choose.
Yeah, you have to pick and choose. And so when you had your small boat, you could take out your halibut gear and go halibut fishing. And we had halibut derbies then, which is what kicked everything off. That was not a good thing. Because everything was jammed up in a very small period of time. There was a lot of wastage. That's what really started this whole rationalization thing. And so there again, another complicated story. But it really destroyed a lot of our small community fleets. It did. And now we're in the aftermath in this next third generation, so to speak, of those impacts. And we're losing that. We're losing that. So we're not. I don't think we're taking care of Alaskans. We're certainly not doing it on the Yukon. We're not doing it on the Kuskokwim. We're not doing it in the Gulf.
Yeah. Wow.
Money's driving it all.
Yeah.
Big money.
And honest, I mean, that's really true of a lot of issues.
Yeah, it is. But we have a state constitution that says, Article 8, that we are to take care of our wild resources and for the benefit of who?
Yeah.
Alaskans.
Yeah. Alaskans have equal opportunity to the resources.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that's really a lot of people's big frustration with the entire issue is they look at it from the outside and it's blatantly obvious that it's not being handled in what you could say a constitutional manner.
No. And the Fairbanks AC has been accused, I won't tell you who, a well-known figure in Alaskan politics, who happens to be a personal friend. We never agree on politics, but we're still friends.
That's the way it should be.
That's rare these days.
That's the way it should be, man.
yeah, really. I mean, Alaskans do that better than anybody, I think.
Oh, yes.
Because we have to sit across the table from our dinner tables from each other
Mm-hmm.
and be civil,
Yep.
and that's even in the AC, we have to do that.
Yep.
And, but this well-known individual testified at one of the Board of Fish meetings, and I called them up right away after I sent a message, have him call me, and he called me immediately. And he said, Gale, it doesn't look good that the Fairbanks AC is battling all these hatchery issues. What do you have to do with it? I said, stop right there. First of all, if we didn't do it, who is going to do it?
Right.
And secondly, yes, we're in dire straits up here on the Yukon, and there is a relationship here, whether you like to think about it or not.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So we got through that.
Yeah.
I would have liked to have heard that.
Right.
That was an hour conversation.
I was going to say, we got through that. Sounds like you're really condensing that.
Yeah, I really did.
You gotta hear the unhinged version.
Right. Yeah. So
well, and it is. It's a huge, issue for the entire state.
It is.
Everybody.
It is.
And I mean, I'm assuming how long has it been since we've reached our escapement goals for Canada? Because I mean, I'm sure they're hurting too. All of us.
Oh, we haven't reached those border escapement goals for I'd have to go back, but it's been years, 10 years, I think. And
really?
Yeah. We reached them. There was because they were so low.
Yeah.
But now with the new agreement, 70,000 for Chinook.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not going to reach that number. We just aren't.
Yeah.
To give you an example, last year we had 13,000. I don't know what the number is right now, but it's not much higher than that. Last year, the last few years have been the lowest. And
Total?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah. So the problem is going back to fecundity and going back to the fish getting smaller and the eggs getting smaller, and therefore the returns are going to be smaller.
Mm-hmm.
So we're like diminishing returns.
Yep.
And so there's that. But much more than that, it comes down to having this holistic approach to managing salmon. This gravel to gravel cannot be lip service. It has to be real.
Mm-hmm.
You have to take a salmon, a Chinook salmon or a chum or a coho, it doesn't matter, and follow it down the river.
Yeah.
Follow its pathway through life and then back up the river again.
Mm-hmm.
And then...
Because I'm assuming... I mean, you said the ages of these fish are getting younger.
They are. For the Chinook are, yeah.
And it seems, do they know why that particular part is happening? Because you would think with an instinctual animal like that, right? Like that's kicking in earlier than it normally would, right?
Part of it, because we work with marine scientists as well as most of the scientists actually are marine. Part of it, the theory, is that they're spending more time, the Chinook are spending less time at sea, but they're reaching their maturity levels earlier.
Oh, gotcha.
And so there is a complicated relationship there, but we kind of it really comes back to what are the nutrients in the ocean?
Sure.
And we have a lot of Chinook that come into the river. We talked briefly about ichneophonus, which is a issue that we've known about for 50 years. But only recently has been a focus. And once some people want to make it a boogeyman, it's not a boogeyman. It's been there forever.
Okay.
Fish is a pathogen that gets into the fish hearts. And the theory is they get it from pollock. And because they eat pollock.
Right.
And so, and they run with pollock. And so that was one of the things that weakens fish. But if the fish are coming into the river skinnier and younger, they're not fat like they used to be.
Sure.
And they have to go 2,000 miles in some cases. So they don't have the fat reserves that can help them, especially the females. They don't have the fat reserves for having their eggs, because their eggs start out small when they're coming into the river, and then gradually as they go upriver, the eggs keep getting bigger and bigger. But they're eating up their fat reserves too fast.
Right.
And so that's one theory that they're just not getting enough groceries in the ocean.
It's good. Yeah. I mean, it makes perfect sense.
It does, but a lot of things that make sense may or may not be reality.
That's true. Yeah.
So we have to really keep at this. We have to keep at understanding it. But we do know some things that we can do. So you have to focus on what we can do as humans, because we can't do anything about climate change right now as much as we want to. We can't. There's some things we can't do anything about. So we have to focus on what we can do. And what we can do is decrease bycatch, decrease intercept, watch our in-river, how we catch fish, even if we're allowed certain harvest, how we handle fish. Like this summer when we're using dip nets and other things to not handle king salmon. But here's the kicker. Every gill netter knows this, whether you're on the river or on the salt. You get a fish caught by the gill, it's a dead fish. It's not going to make it up to the spawning ground.
Right.
So dip nets, you can damage a fish, even in the copper. You can damage their noses. They follow their noses to their spawning grounds. I mean, there's things, you don't want to handle a fish.
Well, and to that point, just a little tidbit. So one of the salmon that we caught, because we were using the gill net style net in there, it was the one you provided. And I had a fish that got caught in that had a huge bite out of the side of it. Not sure what made it.
Probably a seal.
Either a seal or something of that nature.
They can survive that.
Yeah. It was a gnarly
Those
bite.
heal quick.
And,
that would hurt, but they can still survive that.
Yeah, and it looked nasty. It didn't look like something I'd want to keep, right? I mean, if you get if I shot a moose with a gaping wound on one quarter, I'm not.
No, but it would make it to the spawning grounds, and that's what you want.
Right. But the fact that I had caught it in the net, I kept the fish.
Yeah.
And I just cut out the bad parts. That was all.
Because the gill will rip and then you can't make it with that ripped gill. That's the one thing they can't do.
Yeah.
So, but I've seen some gnarly looking chewed up fish in spawning grounds.
Between rocks and everything, trying to eat them and whatnot.
Yeah, exactly. They're pretty good navigating that, but what really gets them is when they're in the salt and the seals take a bite or whatever.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We used to have seals and sea lions and whales even that would, we'd have 900 feet of net out and they'd go cherry picking. We'd have eagles doing that.
Really?
I have one funny story to wind this up. So we were out, we had 900, that's what we're allowed, 900 feet of net on our gill net in the sound. And it was a gorgeous day. And we're fishing. Drift nets cannot fish; they can't be rocked down. If you get your gill net caught on a rock that's close to shore, that's a rock down, and that's illegal because that's a set net situation.
Oh,
drift nets have to be free, and so you put your net out, and you've got your buoys on top and the leads on the bottom, and then you just have to make sure you're maneuvering the boat all the time to keep it off the rocks if you're fishing near shore. So when you get a slack tide, you really got to watch it. So or a tide that's coming in. So we're out there on a gorgeous day one day, and the net, it was slack tide. The net's getting a little gnarly at the end, and we're watching through the binocs at the end of what's going on with the net itself, and getting ready to because we're anchored at one end of the net, and we're getting ready to let the boat go and go to the other end of the net so that we can pull it out or do whatever we need to do. And in the process of doing that, here comes an eagle. And the end of that net was, because there was a little swirly thing going on there, and the net was kind of folding in on itself on the very end. It wasn't rocked down. And so this eagle comes in, and he lands on the salt, and he picks up a salmon that was in the net. And he's frustrated. Now, when eagles, their talons, they get in that flesh.
Sure.
And it's hard to get them out,
Oh,
they're hooked in really good. And so he's got all of his talons hooked into this fish, and we're watching the show. And so he has to get it out of the net, which he gets it out of the net, but he can't take off with it. It's a big chum, and he can't take off with it. It was a big bald eagle. So he does something. he swims with it and he paddles with his wings. Honest to God, paddles with his wings. I wish I'd had a video of it, but we watched it for a long time. Both of us did. And I've heard other fishermen say, yeah, they do that. And so he paddled to shore. He got that fish to shore because he...
Really?
Yes.
A swimming eagle.
Yeah, paddling.
Or a paddling eagle.
Paddling eagle. Yeah, right. It was the funniest thing.
Well, we call that brute force and ignorance.
Whatever. Determination.
Yeah.
One hungry eagle.
Right.
Scavenging out of our net.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, let's take our second break, and I got a lot more questions for you.
Oh dear. Okay. Okay.
All right, folks. We all know that one of the most common mishaps in hunting is damage to your rifle scope. Last year, I found the solution to that problem with the Stealthy Hunter rifle cover. It wraps around your scope and actions securely to protect it from getting knocked off of zero or even severely damaged. Stealthy Hunter also has a glassing pad and a wide variety of supplements for the outdoorsman, such as protein powder, CBD products, turmeric, and gut health supplements. They also make a lightweight trauma kit weighing in at just 14 ounces that includes everything you need and nothing you don't for all of your backcountry medical emergencies. To shop all of their equipment and supplements, go to stealthyhunter.com and enter the discount code at checkout, The Northern Hunter, to save on your order today. All Stealthy Hunter equipment is proudly made in the USA.
Alrighty. So I wanted to kind of flesh out a little bit more of the other issues that people say are causing the decline, not just with the fisheries, but a lot of people love to throw blame at the bycatch, like we were talking about earlier. And I know you'd mentioned like the bycatch was less in more recent years or some that they'd been trying to regulate themselves a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But why don't you kind of dive into what the issue with the bycatch is and kind of what we can do about that?
Sure. Bycatch, of course, is a generic term, and it could be bycatch anywhere. But the bycatch that we're talking about is the Bering Sea pollock industry.
Gotcha.
And they have two seasons, the A and B season. And the salmon bycatch prior to 2014 was huge.
Really?
Because in 2014, I was in Nome and with a bunch of other people from the Yukon and the Kuskokwim and Nome area. And we were testifying on an amendment to, I think it was Amendment 110. I should know this, but I don't remember. and anyway, it was for Chinook bycatch, and it was an amendment to the Fisheries Management Plan for the pollock industry.
Gotcha.
And so in 2014, we were successfully able to present the case for the impact on the AYK. And so the it was a week-long meeting, and it was very emotional, very dramatic.
Sure, yeah.
And we had some really good people working with us. And so we were able to get this amendment passed at the North Pacific Council. And that is it's a very complicated plan, but it really helped to reduce the Chinook bycatch dramatically at the council. Not as much as we want it to be.
Mm-hmm.
There's still, numbers are still not as great as but it did reduce it. Simultaneously, we could not put in a chum plan. So we are working on a chum plan right now. Chum plan's a lot more complicated because if we look at some of the alternatives that are the measures that are being proposed for a chum bycatch reduction, it's going to affect the Chinook bycatch plan.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, there's several alternatives, usually 4 alternatives that are brought before the council. The North Pacific Council, all the councils in the country, there's 8 of them, are very, it's a slow process. It's a very thorough process, but it's very slow. And so we've been able to illustrate over the last several years that the chum bycatch is not acceptable level. And they do genetic testing off of these bycatch numbers and stuff.
Gotcha.
And the Bering Sea pollock industry is 100% observer coverage. So there's at least 2 observers in every boat to cover. This new Chevron doctrine that was overturned at the Supreme Court may have some impact on that, which would not be a good thing. But we'll see.
As far as taking the observers off the boats?
Well, and I don't think they'll do it for the pollock industry because those are big boats.
Yeah.
The Chevron case was brought by people on the East Coast that were in the small boat fleet.
Gotcha.
And they were looking at the burden. But the subsequent ruling will affect all of these other things going forward.
Gotcha.
So, and we don't have any idea what's going to happen here. But at least I don't have any idea. I'm sure some people do. but we're right now in the process of looking at the final alternatives for the chum bycatch. And the council meets 5 times a year. They will be meeting in Anchorage in October. And they will be looking, and then they're going to have a special meeting, I think, in February.
Okay.
That will be on the final. But, and I just got the agenda for October, so I haven't really looked at it that much.
And that all these meetings coming up are to try and implement this like before the next fishing season kicks off? Is that what they're looking
no,
for? Or hash it out?
No, because the council works in such a slow pace that they'll go through several seasons before they get anything decided. It's not like the Board of Fish.
Gotcha. Okay.
But the council does have what we call an SSC, which is this Science and Statistical Committee that meets simultaneously, and they have an AP, which is the advisory panel. So all of those 2 subcommittees advise the council itself. They go through all of the amendments and alternatives. They both have people who testify and look at, and you can go to the council website and get hundreds of documents. I mean, it's really very very easy to get information. But to go through all that is a lot. And so right now in the bycatch in the Bering Sea, the numbers are high, but the percentages of each of the bycatch of the chum and the Chinook that go into each tributary, each like the Yukon or the Cusco or where up into the Unalakleet, that is it varies, but it's not. I don't have the bycatch number percentages in front of me right now, but they're big enough to be significant to the species, but they're not big enough to be a boogeyman.
Gotcha.
You know that if you eliminated that bycatch entirely, it would help the species into the rivers, but it wouldn't help it dramatically. I don't believe. That goes back to the cumulative issue.
Right.
And I have been more concerned personally about the Bering, the intercept fishery down at Area M.
Okay.
It's much differently managed. That's a state waters fishery. It's strictly intercept. And for people online, there are very few intercept fisheries in Alaska. Area M is one of them. It's managed on a 3-year Board of Fish cycle. Unlike most of our systems are managed in season on escapement goals from and forecasting. And so it's a different way of managing. So that means every 3 years you have to battle it out. The Board of Fish as to what the management plan will be for the next 3 years.
Oh.
And
doesn't seem very reactive.
It's not reactive. And that was part of the problem. But we had such a contentious meeting in February of 23 because all our Board of Fish meetings are on 3-year cycles. And you know what they're going to be ahead of time. And so in 23, we had some proposals in from the AC, and we had hundreds. Our proposal was a significant reduction in the intercept for that June fishery, because that's the June fishery in Area M is what catches most of the chum that are AYK related.
Gotcha.
And some Chinook as well. So we had a very contentious meeting. Didn't get nearly what we wanted. What happened was there was sort of a backroom deal between some of the board members at the time with the local seine fleet.
Mm-hmm.
And they came up with a plan to self-regulate.
I think I remember hearing about that.
Yeah. That's not kosher in my world for more to fish, but that's what they did. And a lot of us were very upset about that. And but at the same time, we had talked with the Alaska State Troopers, with the wildlife troopers, to have more presence on the fishing grounds, because that area is notoriously hard to monitor.
Mm-hmm.
It's a huge, wide area, and you've got both gill net boats and seine boats, and then set netters too, but mostly gill net and seine.
Okay.
And that fleet's really spread out, and the wildlife troopers have limitations in their resources, just like everybody else.
Yep.
So they did increase their presence, because we kept saying that there was, because we have people on the ground telling us in what was going on. That's what you hear. You have to get down, talk to the fishermen, and find out what's really going on. And we had people telling us that there was a lot of what we call chum chucking.
Yeah.
And they were, in order to not go over their quota, they fishermen, because they weren't getting any price for chum anyway, they would throw their chum overboard.
Yep.
And so the troopers that year, and that was 23, did that summer, they had 9 citations for chum chucking. And they were only there for a small window of the time. I mean,
yeah,
I'm sure it would have been a much. I mean,
with a bigger presence and a longer window.
I don't want to trash fishermen. But I know fishermen, because I was one of them. So I know the things that you try to get away with.
Yeah. Well, and it's just one of those things. It's just like why they're out, patrolling during the caribou hunt up on the 40 mile. It's the same reason why they're watching the moose in 50-inch areas.
Yes, right.
You want to believe the best in people, right? And I'm one of those people too.
Yeah.
I want to believe the best in everybody.
Yeah.
But widespread integrity has never really worked out for humans.
Well, you're out there in a remote area and you think, oh, I can get away with this.
Right. Yeah. And, sometimes I'm speeding on the highway.
I have a buddy that he's
But-
changed careers since, so I guess I can kind of mention this, but he was a fisherman for a long time here in Alaska. We had some sit downs and I was like, wow. And he's like, yeah, it can get pretty unethical out there.
Mm-hmm.
He's, kind of.
You're not going to hear most of the stories of things that the fishermen. You're just not going to hear about that.
I mean, there's some things that we talked about that I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
I mean, well, shocked me. I was like, what?
And you got to think, even on like a personal level, right? Like when you're tagged out on halibut
Mm-hmm.
and you pull up a big halibut
Mm-hmm.
and you're sitting there saying, man, that's bigger than either of the two I've
Yeah.
got.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, but those those little chickens taste way better.
Yeah.
Oh, they do. I love those
Yeah.
chickens. But that's the thing. Like, if those thoughts can go through, like, like on
That's
a personal level,
That's human. That's
imagine
human.
when
Yeah.
you're on a company level, an
Well, you got a big
industry
boat.
level.
You have a big boat.
Yeah, you got payroll to manage.
You have
got
payroll.
other stuff.
You've got expenses in that boat. You've got
Yeah.
a debt service to pay.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you a story, and I'm not going to tell you the name of the person, but a lot of people know this story. And it was a person that was on the North Pacific Council. He was on the council, and he also had halibut and blackcod IFQs. And he was caught in like a 5-man crew, I think. And he was caught not once, but twice fishing in an illegal area with his quota permit. He went to federal prison,
Wow.
especially because he was a council member and knew better. But he went to federal prison. So, but he tried to have his crew keep it quiet, and one of his crew was the whistleblower.
Mm-hmm.
Said, "I'm not going to jail for this." So they rigged the GPS, and they're tracking, and
Yeah.
And anyway, so the moral of the story is that when you have a lot riding on what you're doing, I don't care who you are,
Mm-hmm.
you sometimes make poor moral judgments.
Oh, sure.
Or if you don't agree with the law, some people just don't agree with the law and they think I'm going to violate it because I don't agree with it.
Right.
Which is what we can't do. But
Yeah.
I mean, we can't run a society that way. But unfortunately, and you're like you said, when you're out caribou hunting or something like that. And I mean, how many people didn't even know they were across the line? They were in a they were across the regulated area. So
no, and you'll still get hung up. Ignorance is not an excuse.
No,
and
it's
not agreeing is not an excuse either.
Right.
Especially the second time.
Right.
Exactly. Good night.
So we wanted to apply wanton waste to this situation, but we couldn't. It was not applicable according to the law.
Really?
Well, we're looking into this. But wanton waste because anyway, Alberette especially was very keen on helping us with that. And, so we talked with the troopers and they got those citations, and they doubled their effort this last year in 2024. No citations. And I think the fleet itself, there was some self-regulation.
Sure.
I think that they were realizing, we can't be caught again like this.
Sure.
So we're going to talk to our guys and say, look, whatever you're doing, stop it. And we did want people on the docks because the seiners you can't police from the air.
Yeah.
You can't tell what they're doing. But so I feel like we had at least some decent coverage, and we're building awareness is what we're doing. We're building awareness. And I know people who fish down there. I personally know them, they're good people, and the communities depend on this.
Yeah.
It goes back to the problem we were talking earlier about so many people going after a resource that where do you draw the line?
Right.
How many people are going to carve this out? And we can't, it's like overfishing the Georges banks.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have to have breaks on some of this.
So what, like standard practice? So obviously the bycatch that they catch is byproduct of the fact that these salmon are following the pollock around. Right. They're running with them
they're trying to work out excluders.
Yeah.
And they've come up with devices that have helped in excluding Chinook before they get caught in the trawl net.
Okay.
Because those trawl nets are huge. They're,
oh yeah.
Yeah.
I had to maneuver around them a couple times.
Oh, did you? In the Bering Sea?
No, down Prince William.
Oh, okay. But the Bering Sea trawl nets are honestly, you've got hundreds of thousands of pounds of pollock in one net. It's an otter kind of net that goes trawls behind for up to a mile.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. I was thinking of something totally different. Okay. Yeah.
And the trawl end of a big trawler, it goes down like a landing craft, and then you pull that net in, it goes up through, and then they have like a zipper on it, what they call a zipper. And then you should watch it on YouTube sometime. It's a really fascinating process.
Oh yeah.
And I've been on those boats. Yeah, I've been on the boats when they've done this. And so, but you've got so much fish, and then where the observing comes in is on the line, because they goes into the belly of the factory, and it's on the factory line that you watch. The species of fish that are coming through.
Sure.
And the Chinook do run, and chum-two do run with the pollock. So they're trying to find ways to exclude it, and it's not 100%, of course, not even near. And they're still working on ideas they're experimenting with. But at the same token, it's a situation where one species that needs to be protected is affecting another species that doesn't need to be protected.
Right.
And it's like fishing on the Kenai right now. They have that paired restriction between the east side set netters on the sockeye on that late run, and then it's paired with Chinook escapement up into the Matsu. So what happens is that when those numbers of Chinook get too low, the east side set netters are shut down. So
right.
Yeah. So nobody's happy with that, but it's our reality right now.
Mm-hmm.
This is why you get a lot of fishermen saying, well, shouldn't go away. They go away. So what?
Right.
Well,
what happens to the bycatch? I mean, is it just...
Now, the bycatch, it goes through what they call a sea share program. And this is a bit of a contention that we're dealing with right now. And that because those fish are sent down to Seattle and then they're reprocessed down there or redistributed. And they do come back up and go to some Alaska coastal communities.
Okay.
But they go all over.
Gotcha.
And our feeling is really those are game.
Yeah.
There's a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them. And so, I mean, that's a political discussion.
Gotcha.
That's just beginning to go on right now. So the bycatch is utilized, but that isn't the point. The point is that you've got a species in trouble that's...
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, I guess we can kind of roll right into this. I mean, what's the climate like with the regulation makers of this? Because like comparing it to my
I know
world,
where you're going, and I'm glad you asked that question.
Compared to my world, of hunting land animals, if you had a hunting method that indiscriminately killed a certain number of animals or the wrong species, like there's a reason we can't use set guns on bear baits.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Because that indiscriminately kills bears. Mm-hmm. And you can't tell if it's a grizz or a black or a sow with cubs or anything. It's just if it sticks its head in that barrel, hits the tripwire.
Or it could be a non-bear.
Or it could be a non-bear, right? Yeah. So any form of indiscriminate killing is always regulated out.
Right.
And then on top of that, if there's a population that's hurting, like we'll just reference back to the 40-mile herd, that's a varied quota number. From year to year, they look at it, they figure out what they can take, and it's regulated. Nope, we're not going to take more than that. Where's the disconnect between treating fish the same way?
Money. You've got everything with fishing is commercial that's driving all this. And you don't have that with hunting. The only commercial you have with hunting is guides, and and that's a contentious issue, but it's minor in the scheme of things.
Right, compared to
because ADF&G and Fish and Wildlife have free reign to regulate those species, land species, according to their need, and they should. You don't get to go hunting. That's not money out of a corporate pocket.
Right.
But
even though we're supposed to be top of the list, right?
Right. But
allegedly,
but in the world of commercial fishing, especially when it comes to the Bering Sea, billions of dollars are invested in these operations.
Yeah.
And the climate, to give you an example of the climate, we every year there's 2 people that get replaced on the council. Their terms are up and they rotate. And what happens is that 2 people just from the state of Alaska, and there's other states that have, like Washington State has 2 seats on there as well, and some of the sectors do. So there are 2 seats aside from the guaranteed ADF&G seat on the council that the governor, I was on that list twice, that the governor puts in a name. For each of those seats, there's 3 names that are submitted to the Secretary of Commerce. And the governor has kind of a little star at the top of the person he or she really wants to put in there. So this last go around, it was a little bit of a shenanigan issue, and I won't even go into detail. There's usually always politics that play with this. But the Governor Inslee of the state of Washington wanted to put in Becca Robbins Giclair, who is a personal friend, and she's brilliant. She's an attorney, just totally brilliant. And she lives in Washington State now, but she's worked on AYK issues. She was with us in Nome when we did the 2014 amendment. And so he had her starred at the secretary level And we thought it was just a go because we were real excited with all the bycatch issues coming up to have her on there. It was real important to have, because most of the voices there are industry voices.
Sure.
So at the very last minute, the trawl lobby was able to go to the secretary and get that changed, which can happen. It's rare, but it happens. And it was a last minute deal. And they were late in making the announcement. We knew shenanigans were going on because they were late with the announcement.
Yeah.
And so subsequently they got one of their trawl people back on. A nice lady, very nice lady, but represents the industry.
Yeah.
And that's not going to bode well for us going into the bycatch. May or may not, I don't know.
And there's no way to like add any kind of statute that would say only so much of the representation can, like you have to have representation from personal use and industry. And
we've been pushing for a couple of dedicated seats. They do have some dedication seats, like they have a conservation seat. We don't have a tribal seat, but they have they have a State of Alaska Department of Fish and Game seat. They have a Pacific Fisheries Commission seat. I mean, some of them are dedicated, much more so than the Board of Fish.
Right.
But inside that, there's just a lot of politics that goes on with each time there's an appointment, and lots of different sides will lobby. So.
Yeah.
So there we are, but we're working on a little bit of a side channel on this one, so we'll see how that works.
Yeah.
No stories there right now.
Can't lay all your cards on the table just yet.
No. And I'm a very strong believer in, that eventually some of these things, history has proven this out. Some of these things will come around as you increase the education level and awareness, and you increase your political strength. That's what we're about, increasing political strength.
Yeah. And it's hard to battle with an industry that powerful.
It is
when you're just the little guy wanting to eat some fish.
Well,
for the year.
and then of course that industry is yourself sometimes, because these are CDQs that are paired with a lot of these fleets.
Yeah.
And the CDQs have a rough time. They have to balance between their subsistence needs and especially on the Yukon right now. And it's tough for them. Tough decisions if you're a board member there, and you have to face your family and your neighbors when you go back on the decisions you make. And but you have to make money for the company, and because there's some dividends that get paid out, hopefully.
Right.
And so it's tough.
Yeah. There's a lot of layers to it.
A lot of layers.
Yeah. Which is a huge reason I'm so thankful for you to come on the show and talk about this, because, a lot of us, just people who aren't involved necessarily, and you pointed out earlier, Chris, it's just one opinion to another opinion, and two people who really don't know a ton about it, throwing their opinions back and forth.
Ends up inconclusive.
And then great. All of a sudden you're just mad and uneducated, and it's like, it's like
the worst thing to be.
I know. But and listen to, it's there's so many layers to this, and
there are. And that's the message, is that it's very complicated, that you cannot make assumptions. Even the best scientists and the best people who've been in this for a long time, you can't make broad assumptions.
Right.
And there are people's lives involved here. And so we try to educate ourselves.
Yeah.
That's the hardest part.
Yeah. What kind of along those lines, I guess, one of the classic American things we like to do is blame foreigners for, things.
Yeah, right.
And that happens a lot with the fishing issues up here is, there's Japanese ships that are just cruising right across the line from where they're not allowed to fish and doing this and blah, blah,
There's
blah.
There's some truth to that. There's some truth.
I would say, how real is that? Or is that just another one of these things that gets spun in a circle until everybody's mad about it?
We don't have numbers.
Yeah.
You're outside the 200-mile limit, the EZ, so you can't get the data that you want.
Sure. Yeah.
So we don't know how much, like, for instance, Chinook swing out into the international waters and how much bycatch there might be. But we're not going to get those bycatch numbers from
So, has there been effort to do some kind of international like reporting system?
There is. There is a group that international group that meets on these issues, and there's the Anadromous Fish Commission that also reports on it. I mean, we report on the data that we do get, and then,
sure,
and there's discussions. Like Japan has been very forthcoming in a lot of things. Russia in the past, maybe, but not so much now. Up until 2 years ago, we were doing surveys in the Bering Sea and the Gulf of Alaska with the Russians. It was a multi-country effort, which was really productive, and we were actually doing it on Russian boats. but science surveys. But I think as far as what we have to figure out, and better minds than mine know the answer to this. I haven't studied it that much. Is the numbers maybe of our Chinook that will be going outside of the 200-mile limit, and what is our speculation on that? Because what we're really talking about is what are our fish being intercepted at?
Right.
But the greater issue is what are they scarfing up in terms of the forage food for all species. There again, it goes back to the ecosystems discussion, because when you scarf up too much shrimp, it affects different marine animals and fish and marine animals. When you scarf up too much of any one species, like now and in Antarctica, is the big issue is krill.
Oh, really?
The commercial impact on krill, which is a vital food source for a lot of whales.
Yeah. I was just saying that could have a big impact.
Yeah, it could. It could. So all of these things are impactful.
Yeah.
And our oceans have limitations.
Yep.
And
they don't seem like it, but
no, they do. They do. And we have ocean acidity that we're dealing with, and we have warming oceans, which is affecting fish a lot. And that's the other thing about skinnier fish and everything. The warming oceans can have a huge impact on the forage food.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of back to the whole, like, I guess almost butterfly effect. You could call it.
It is. It is, right.
Yeah.
It is the butterfly effect. And so much we don't know. But just because we don't know things, there are some things we do know, and we need to act on those things we do know. That's what it comes down to. We may not like that, but we need honest conversations. And we need to try, like our national politics, we just need to be able to talk across the table with each other and have honest conversations.
Yeah, not go to war with each other over opinions on this or that.
Yeah, exactly, right.
Yeah,
right.
It's...
Because we're all in this together.
Yeah. Educated on those too.
Right. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. It's like, just like with the fishing, I mean, whether you're talking about the country on a whole or the fish in the ocean, I mean, you said it beautifully. We're all in this together. We're all in the same ship, whether we like it or not.
That's it. This is planet Earth, guys, and we're in it.
It sinks. We're all screwed.
Yeah, this is true. This is absolutely true.
Yeah.
And I think fish are harbingers of the condition of our ecosystems. And we have to remember that other critters in our ecosystems depend on fish.
Oh, yeah.
Bear and wolves and eagles and all kinds of things depend on it. This is one problem I have with hatcheries, is they don't bring any nutrients back to their home territory.
Sure. Yeah. Because they just hang out right there. They'll go out for a little bit and come right back to where they were.
Yeah, and they're scarfed up by the boats, and that's the end of their life. And they're fed. They have to be fed food while they're growing in the hatcheries. So, and that's a whole nother story.
And I mean, the simplistic part that comes into my head is like, how hard would it be to separate the hatcheries fish from the wild fish?
We clip their, there's a myth that we clip all our hatchery fish, and we don't. It varies from system to system about, and species to species about how much we clip our fish. But all that tells you is that if you catch a fish, it doesn't prevent you from catching the fish.
Right, right.
So you can't surgically catch hatchery fish only. If we could do that in the Bering Sea, I would love it if we could catch all the hatchery chum and pinks from Russia and get them out of the ocean.
Right.
And not our wild salmon.
Yeah. Well, and that's, like if there was a way to create like a physical separation layer there, that'd be.
You make tons of money on that one.
Yeah,
that would be the answer, right? If AI could catch up to that one, but that will not be in my lifetime for sure.
Yeah, right.
Probably yours either.
No.
I think I'm sort of a crusader, and I think we need to champion our wild salmon. We need to be respectful of it, of what their needs are, and not say you're a commodity. That's
right.
That we're going to just use you up, and then when you're gone, you're gone.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's almost like rewatching what happened to the bison down the 48.
It is.
It's like you see a herd of billions of bison, and you just think it's endless.
Yep.
It's like, oh yeah, that resource will never run out.
That is a great example.
Yeah.
It is. And now we're bringing bison back, but only in bits and pieces. It'll never be like it was.
Right.
But bison were really adapted to the environment. So therefore, they were good for the grasslands. They were good for, much better than beef cattle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's a reality we don't like to look at.
Right.
We like our beef.
But yeah, and it's one of those things you love to look at where we're at and think we're so far evolved from where we were, with regulations and understanding of how we fit in with the natural world at the capacity that we exist now.
Right.
Until you look at the fishing industry, apparently.
Well, being part Native American, I grew up with a value system, and even Norwegian. I grew up with a value system that really recognized the interaction of species and environmental issues. And what's happened, because we've commercialized every single bit of our life, and we've paved over grasslands and all kinds of stuff, and we've created so much havoc in this country over stuff like that. And a lot of it was out of ignorance,
Sure.
And it was also out of need, because we have millions of people in this country that we have to take care of, and somehow, and they have to have livelihoods. And how do we do that without making things a whole lot worse? I think that's what younger generations are struggling with right now, and probably doing a good job with it. They're going to clean up our mess in my generation. But
we're just flowing with the punches at this point.
Right. Sorry, guys. I mean, you get to my age and you get a certain perspective on life.
I remember we got way off topic tonight.
It's what we do.
I was talking to this guy one time. It's just kind of like right after high school, I started going down and I'd hoop net lobster in the fall, and I was talking to these guys, these older guys, and we're talking about like the lobster numbers and how regulated it is and this and that, how strict it is. And I'm just young and dumb and clueless. And I'm like, what happened? And the guy's like, well, he's like, that's simple. He's like, too many bleats like me and this guy right here over harvested our limits. And, and I'm like,
that's honesty.
Well, and I look at him and I was like, really? And he goes, that's exactly what the problem is. And then he kind of went into the same thing, like regarding like scallops. And he was saying the same thing. He was like, just, like you just anticipate an endless resource and you abuse it. And
that is the nature.
And I just kind of, that's always stuck with me, because I'm like, what?
Right.
At least he admitted it.
Yeah.
No, that's.
Well, we've done that. In I was part of a crab rebuilding project. It's called ACRAB, the Alaska King Crab Research and Rehabilitation. And I was actually one of the founding members of that back in 2004. And And it was surely by accident. I knew nothing about crab ecology. Absolutely nothing. It was long story short. Anyway, we got together with a bunch of scientists and we said, we need to learn about crab ecology. We need to figure this out. And it turns out I wasn't just a crab scientist at all, but it turns out a lot of the crab scientists didn't know much about crab ecology.
Oh, really? The blind leading the blind.
and what we were trying to do is
the 80% blind leading the blind.
Wait, what? You don't know what you're doing either? That's why we brought you here.
Well, I mean, what they were trying to say is we don't know enough.
Right,
you know?
right. Yeah.
And they knew a lot more than I did because I knew about a thimbleful, if that much. So the and I wrote an article. I can send you the article. It was kind of funny, but it was a reaction to the crab crashes in the king crab in Kodiak in the Gulf of Alaska, and that was in the mid '80s. And what happened was, again, cumulative impacts. It was a bit of overfishing. It was a bit of this and that and the other thing. And climate, we call it a regime shift. Climate change was part of that. You know, because water temperature really affects crustacea.
Oh, I can imagine.
Yeah. So you get to the point where that numbers were so low, and this is a lesson for us in salmon. Get to the point where the crab numbers for king crab were so low they couldn't repopulate.
Oh.
Yeah. And they still haven't. King crabs still have not come back. But in the meantime, we had 3 labs. One for fish and game, one was private tribal, and one was NOAA at Auk Bay, Auk Bay, and one in Kodiak, that started to study crab ecology, and we learned a huge amount. We learned over the years, and now they want to have these little crab hatchery systems, which I really fought that one tooth and nail because no, we're not there yet, you know. And what is this going to have? Crab are very migratory. What's this going to do to other species and blah blah blah?
Right. Like, haven't we learned this lesson?
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Right. But there is some truth. I'm like, I used to fish over for years and years and years over at Old Harbor, and we would put down crab pots, and this was subsistence crab pots. And we put them down and and you have tanner crabs at one trophic level, and then you'd have king crab, which were really in the bottom. So sometimes when you pulled up pots, you were starting to get crab balls, king crab balls, more and more, seeing them more frequently, which was a very good, healthy sign. But it was just minute compared to the need.
Gotcha.
But it was hopeful, you know?
Yeah.
So there are so many things that we learn, and we, like maybe the bison or whatever, and we build it back up, and we look at them. We look at that window, and we think, "Oh, there's so many of them. We're in good shape." Right. We do that with caribou a lot.
Yeah.
And, what's the problem here, guys? And
that's a whole nother episode.
Oh boy,
it is. And then caribou being migratory, you can't contain them in one game management unit.
No, yeah, you can't.
Hey, what about caribou hatcheries?
Yeah, you just start cloning caribou.
Well, you know, there are the reindeer projects.
Yeah.
Yep. That's a whole other story I could tell you about, but and then we have bison, and I'm a lot of people in our communities that I represent are not that happy with that. They're split on it. I personally, looking at the history, they are indigenous to Alaska.
Oh yeah.
And wood bison, and I think it's a good thing because they don't compete with other land animals for forage food. And we did want to get them out of Anoka because it was freezing over too much down there.
Yeah. They lost 50% of the herd, didn't they?
Yeah. And
rough stuff.
Yeah, it is. And that can happen anywhere, but it happens often with caribou and reindeer, especially in Europe. You know, they can't paw through to get their food. But so hopefully they'll do better.
I've heard they're handling predation pretty well.
Yeah, they are. And if you know much about bison, you can understand why.
Hard target.
Yeah. Well,
very dense.
A lot of people don't know that there's a number of bison herds in Alaska. And there's a big one down on Kodiak Island.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know about that one.
Yeah. And I used to go fishing down there on American Creek, which is on the south west side of Kodiak. And there was a ranch down there, and a guy was raising, and he had started out with cattle, but you're in grizzly country.
I was where you're talking about this last winter.
Okay, so you're down there in brown bear country, and cattle will disperse. They'll go. If bear comes in the middle of them, they'll scatter. They'll scatter, and they're easy pickings. Bison won't do that, and the muskox won't do that. What they do, as you know, is they circle around and herd up. And so we were doing a horseback trip one time off the ranch and over to where we're going to go salmon fishing. And the guy who owned the ranch said he had his rifle on his scabbard, and he said, and I was just assuming it was for brown bear. And we get up to this one hill before we have to go back down into where the ocean was, the creek, and going up through the woods, and way out, maybe a couple 100 yards out, not that far out, in the field, is this monster bison. I mean, the big daddy, and he was just kept off by himself for a good reason. And he said he gets a little cranky once in a while, and if we get too close, so the rifle was to, scare him off. They wouldn't be charging us on horseback. Oh yeah. But otherwise, we took the horses and we milled in with the herd. I got great pictures. We were just right in with the bison herd. They didn't care, but that big bull, he was protecting that herd, and he wasn't going to let us through.
Wow.
What are again, kind of off topic, but you sound like you know a lot about that area down there. What's the cattle, the island that has the old cattle on it, and they're like Asiatic cattle, right?
Yeah,
they're aggressive.
They're aggressive, and it is. Oh, it'll come to me a minute. You think I'd remember the name of the island, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
Starts with an N, doesn't it?
I'm not.
I was just talking to somebody about this not too long ago.
I think you and I were talking about it.
Oh, I'm going there, dude.
Yeah. yeah. They
cow hunting.
I'm from cattle country, bro. I want to see Alaskan cattle.
Chiricahua Island is one of them. And they 100 years ago they brought cattle there, and they didn't have any bears there. So.
Yep.
And they're like they're really old species, right?
Yeah, they're an old species.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Not very domesticated.
I've heard that, yeah.
I heard they're really aggressive.
Yeah.
I hear they taste pretty good, too.
They probably do.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. They probably eat saltgrass, so who knows?
Right. Yeah, it's pre-seasoned.
Right.
A little salt and peppers.
Right. Yeah,
Nature's brine.
Yeah, a lot of those species they'll eat kelp. They'll eat a lot of stuff when they've adapted. But go out to Akutan or Attica, or for reindeer or caribou.
Yeah, same thing.
Yeah.
Brought there for a food source.
Yeah,
and
no predators.
Isn't that's a lot of the animals on Kodiak? Even weren't those introduced as food sources? I heard, or by maybe not as food sources, but somebody was telling me even the squirrels there were like introduced. Like,
oh yeah, the sailors, the ships would bring in Norway rats.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
which is really something you want to eradicate almost immediately. But there are a lot of introduced species, and we've done that all over the country.
Oh sure,
to get rid of one thing, and then we discovered like in Australia when they introduced the rabbits.
Well, and that's what kicked off that whole wild boar issue they're having all over the South right now.
Yeah, exactly.
It was all introduced.
It all introduced. You're exactly
right. That took
a
long time too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
that was like a big evolution for that to get to where
it was, and now it's a real problem. And same with boa constrictors when they're
like in Florida and stuff.
Yeah.
Like
all the swamps, huge.
Flushing them down the toilet doesn't work.
Yeah. Right? They go somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what they got, the iguanas and there's all those invasive fish species. And,
bass is a huge one on the West Coast that was introduced. Species that are introduced from the Midwest and carp, and there's all kinds of species that are And of course, here in the interior and all over Alaska right now, we're having a problem with alodia, which is a grass, that came in on fish tanks, on commercial or retail fish tanks. It's
Really?
alodia is a good grass for fish tanks. And then when people would dump their fish tanks out in the waterways, and it took years and years and years.
Really?
But now they adapted so well. Like Badger Slough, right down here from you, is one of the ground zero places for alodia infestation.
No kidding.
You can go drive down there right now, and they try to take boats and scarf it up. And down in the Kenai, they were so bad because they get on the floats of planes or whatever, and it's all over the state now. But Kenai had a couple of lakes down there where they killed the entire lake. They poisoned it to get rid of the alodia.
Really?
I'm sure that does damage to everything else.
Oh, yeah.
Then that
Killed everything.
Fish.
Yeah. But it was a float plane lake, and they were just trying to. So they were just. I think it was a stock lake. So I don't.
Yeah.
And so that's like an aquarium.
Yeah, it's an aquarium. Yeah.
Commercially available.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Well, and you got to how neglected are those tanks and stuff? I'm sure that stuff's pretty resilient for that purpose.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
It probably
right,
just thrives in
thrives.
nature.
Yeah, right.
Just anywhere.
Yeah, but you can go down here in Badger Slough and you'll see that it looks like just a carpet of grass on the water.
Really? I've seen it.
Like seaweed, like a seaweed kind of.
Yeah.
That's alodia.
Ah.
And it anchors itself to it's really hard to eradicate.
Huh.
You really have to kind of pull it up by its roots and just burn it. Or poison it.
And that's all from human introduction.
Yeah.
Crazy.
And I know exactly what you're talking about because I lived on the slough for a while there, and we'd always fish, at night. And I remember seeing that stuff in there. Like, this stuff looks really out of place.
It is out of place
in comparison to all the other aquatic vegetation that you're like, oh yeah, that looks like it goes. Like, but I remember that grass.
Well, it chokes up habitat.
Mm-hmm.
Is what it does, and it chokes up salmon habitat. Not so much an issue in Badger Slough, but we're in other places that it gets to.
Mm.
And it's not the only one that's an invasive that affects salmon, but there's Chinese mitten crabs too.
Wow, yeah.
And they eat up salmon there. If you go down by Valdez, there's they came off the boats. And that a lot of the ships bring in invasive species from around the world.
Oh, sure.
You know what I saw some crazy thing I was watching. I don't know if you know about this, and I can't remember where it was in Alaska, like southeast or something. But there's a crawfish season where the crawfish were like,
really?
Yes.
Yeah, there is an Alaskan crawfish.
What?
Yeah. And they tried to eradicate it by like they have these like derbies and stuff.
Yeah, right.
And I was like, is this real? I gotta ask somebody about this when I get a chance.
Yeah.
I want to do that.
Do you know much about that?
Not a lot. I just don't exist, but I don't know much about it. But
it just blew my mind. I'm like, wait, what?
Oh, I got to look into this.
Oh, yeah.
Right,
do an old crawfish boil. Yeah, buddy.
It's probably like she was talking about like the cattle. That probably tastes like garbage.
Just got to put that on a cockadoo.
I have no idea what they taste like.
A lot of sriracha.
Yeah, right.
Man.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, all good examples of kind of what we're talking about. Introduction and management.
Yeah. It all comes down to that.
Comes down to management.
And knowledge and education.
Mm-hmm.
And the more educated we become, and the more that we understand how all of these are interactive, with each other.
So with everything that they have so far, I mean, what are like the steps that have been taken thus far? Like, I mean, I know you'd mentioned that the bycatch regulations you guys had implemented.
Right.
You're working on more for the chum, and I was just, what else kind of stuff are they has been done so far?
Well, as I said earlier, that the Fairbanks AC is getting a lot of criticism for going after the hatcheries, and there again, I really don't want to be seen as that. But the point of the matter is that we're pushing for a discussion. More than anything else right now, we need a real, honest discussion. And we need it independent. And we need independent research. We can't depend on the agencies because, very frankly, the agencies, as good as they are, and as talented as people are, they failed a lot of this, and it's not. It's just a matter of of educating and becoming aware, and practices that are out of date. We have a lot of practices that are out of date, and we're not examining them.
Yeah.
And if the truth be known, we were talking off podcast earlier. If the truth be known, and you listen to a lot of elders and you listen to a lot of people who've been around for a long time, you'll hear stories that'll set your hair on fire. And that's from all of us doing things, going back to our recent discussions, all of us doing things that we shouldn't have been doing.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's a learning process when we talk with each other and we call each other out. That's the other thing. You have to call each other out on these things.
And people don't like being called out.
No, we don't.
Yeah. I don't like being called out.
No, none of us do. But I have learned to be a little humble when it comes to so much that I don't know, because what I don't know is far more than what I do know. And so if you find people that you can trust and just trust their judgment, and you go to them, and if you're still confused, you go to several more people, and you develop a consensus of what might be going on. But we don't have enough cross-jurisdictional. Here's one thing to leave with you with. We have a very fractured management system in Alaska for fish. We've got state and federal. That's the top of the list. But inside both state and federal are different agencies. So they compete with each other, or not compete's not the word, but they sometimes are at cross purposes with each other.
Yeah.
And sometimes don't talk to each other. And so therefore you don't have a consensus. You don't have a venue for building consensus.
Yeah.
And then we have our legislature, and then we have Board of Fish, and then we have council, and we have all these regulatory agencies that have the same problem. So we're so fractured.
There's just no unified front to take this issue on.
No, there's not. Yeah. There's not. And we need that desperately.
I would say that sounds like one of the first things we need to fix.
Yeah, that would be. I would, going back to what you say I would do if I could queen for a day, that would be probably the first thing, is to build a venue for that discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Now, one of the hotter topics, especially in my world, dealing with the travel that I do and the communities that I visit, with the fact that there's been no subsistence fishing for Chinook for years along the communities on the Yukon. And every time I'm out, whether it's one of the side tributaries or it's Yukon River proper, that's a huge thing.
It is.
That's a huge cultural impact for those people, and not just from a food source perspective.
It's cultural.
The food source is a huge factor, but you're losing that fish camp culture where the children aren't growing up doing this. They're not having this as part of their life.
Fish camp was so much more than that. Fish camp was the pipeline for information for everything that was going on in the river.
Right.
It was the social gathering points. It's the way different generations interacted with each other and taught each other. The elders taught the kids, and they learned about the resource. Canada has been warning us about that for years, and they do cultural camps, but they have to fly in their fish.
Right.
And then we're getting to that. We're at that point now.
Right.
And it's a real shock to everybody. And subsistence is, so many people, especially in the commercial world, don't understand subsistence. They don't appreciate it. They don't understand it. It's an economy. It really is an economy.
It is.
And it's just like taking away something out of a commercial economy that's like a cornerstone of that economy. If you take out the banking system from, what would happen then?
Right.
So I think the one thing that's the messaging from subsistence users is that not only are they hurting, but they understand the necessity for caring for the species in perpetuity.
Right.
And this is still a learning process for everybody on the river. I mean, we don't agree,
Oh yeah. I mean, there's, and I've had that experience speaking to people out there. Some are very understanding of the process and the hope for the fight that this will return someday if we do our job correctly,
Right.
And others are just livid about it. And
I don't blame them.
Yeah, I don't either.
Yeah, but we have to get over the blame game because that's not going to be helpful. We have to get to a place where we can dialogue about, okay, what are we going to do now? We're supposed to have a rebuilding plan on the Yukon. We have radio silence on that right now, but you cannot have a rebuilding plan on the Yukon unless you engage people who live there.
Right.
You have, because they're the ones that are going to be doing this long after some of these managers are long gone and retired.
Sure. Yeah.
They have to live with us.
Yeah.
And they are, and that's an education process by itself. And the loss of fish camps is hurting that education process.
Yeah. That sharing of values,
the
and
knowledge,
information.
right? Exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm a big believer in, and I know a lot of our groups are, the fish commissions and the tribes are trying to hold together, fish camps for different reasons. And I'm a firm believer in that. I think it's good for all kids. I don't care if you live on the river or not.
Oh, yeah. Well, and there's something about taking a kid out to camp.
Yeah.
And making them work really hard.
Exactly. Right.
And,
and giving them skills.
Yeah.
Giving them skills.
But, and that's kind of where I think the difference might be between like the cultural camps versus the fish camps is that reward of you did this hard work and this is the result.
Exactly.
The smokehouse is full.
The smokehouse is full. Yeah.
And you get that sense of achievement there. You're not just sitting there death by PowerPoint, It's like
right. No, that's exactly the point.
Yeah.
You have and hopefully if we can come up with a food distribution system for 20 years or whatever it takes, that we can at least get there timely so people can have fish camps to do exactly that. It may not be fish they pull out of the river, but at least they can learn how to use the traditional methods for
processing,
making fish strips. My gosh, we all miss our fish strips. Oh my, talk about candy. Oh my gosh, it's so good. And but all of those things are situational, and we're new. It's brand new right now. We're struggling to find a way to. Everybody is to find a way to keep these cultural traditions alive. But inside of those cultural traditions is something very important. You're teaching the kids about the ecosystems. You're teaching them about the resource.
Right.
And that's why I'm saying it doesn't matter where you live, that all kids need to learn that.
They do.
It's like putting a kid on the farm.
Yep. Make them throw hay bales for a few weeks.
Right. When I raised boys, I always said, just wear them out.
Yep. Now, the fishing disappearing off the river, the subsistence opportunities going away, was that part of a wider, like, kind of zero catch policy that was implemented, or was it like we just can't?
Say the question again.
The people that live along the river not being able to catch the fish.
Yeah.
Was that implemented alongside like the no bycatch policies that you were talking about, or the limited bycatch policies?
That is a great question.
Yeah.
No. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier about the burden. The people on the river are paying a bigger burden than anybody else right now. And the people in Canada paid that burden for 20 years before we felt it on the Alaskan side. So the bigger issue is that they're still, because they're different management worlds, they're connected, but they're still separate from each other.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And we're trying to bridge those connections.
Yeah, because some of the other rivers, like I heard, wasn't it just 2 years ago the Chandelar actually met their goals?
As far as Jendrik, right? Yeah. They were one of the few.
I know. Yeah, it was like one of 2 or 3 rivers.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's actually one that was for Fall Chum.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that will happen again this year, but
right.
just because that's another segment about escapement gulls. It's a whole big issue, and we're going to be taking that up at the AC.
Are you?
Yeah, because we haven't met hardly any escapement gulls. We met our drainage wide gull on summer chum, but what people don't understand is because we're not a commercial industry on the river anymore, we don't have a lot of escapement gulls.
Mm-hmm.
We have very few. We have China Salcha, Anvik, Andrewski, I think has one. Gendrick. There's very few that have real escapement gulls. That's an issue.
That is an issue, yeah.
So how do we make drainage-wide escapement gulls when we can't meet our tributary gulls?
Right.
There's a mystery there.
Yeah. Things aren't adding up.
Yeah, it's just not adding up. No, it's not.
Yeah.
I wanted to get your thoughts on like people just over harvesting fish and how that attributes to these issues. Like you see right around the time that tip net's getting hot. Does anyone need to feed their sled dogs? And it just it never used to bother me. I never caught on to that. And then I'm like, and the other day before we went dip netting, I told my wife, she's like, go get some fish. She's always messing with me. She's like, don't come home till you have your limit. And with your shielder on it. Well, yeah. They better carry you back in here. No, and I arrogantly said to her, I was like, well, whatever. We have fish from last year. And she's like, we don't. And I'm like, what do you mean?
They went to the dogs?
She's like, no, she's like, we ate it all. And like last year, I kept 18 fish.
Yeah.
I was like, this is good. This is good for my house.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and all my buddies are like, that's all you kept?
Yeah.
Like, we just ran out. She's like, she's like, you know, those tails that we just ate the other day? That was it. That's it. Our freezer's empty. And I was like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
And you just see this every single year. I have a bunch of I got about 100 pounds of freezer bird salmon. I got 40 pounds of You're like,
yeah.
What? Why?
Well, that's really wanton waste, but that's a personal thing. And why do you do that is right. Like if people, I hear that less and less, but there is still a lot of that. People clean out their freezers in spring. They donate to the animal shelters or they donate to a dog musher. That's what I do with my old fish. But I have fish from several years back, like that's very well been vacuum packed. I took out a sockeye from Kodiak that was 5 years old the other day, and it was fine.
Yeah, right.
Because the seal hadn't broken. You know?
Yeah,
and I got some halibut that's like that. But so I'm eating out of my freezer. I was very fortunate for a long time to get a lot of. But my ex-husband had a fish camp. He used to send me a lot of food, and then when I commercially fished, I had a lot. But I don't do that anymore. So and I have my resources are lessening, so I've been buying fish sometimes, but mostly I still have quite a bit in my freezer. So but when that's gone, it's gone. So the issue is, how do you take care of your fish first? And you guys know how to take care of fish very well. You value it, and because that's a sustenance, it's a really good sustenance. And I would just, for new people to Alaska GIs and stuff like that, I would just have good education for them.
Yeah.
You know, I would encourage that a lot. Just take care of your fish.
Right.
It's a privilege.
It'll last a long time if you take care of it correctly.
It will. Yeah. It will. And it's a privilege.
That whole thing you said about pulling like old fish out and eating it. My wife and I thought it was 2020. We pulled some caribou out that was from 2019. And we were like, we always just kind of trip out on this kind of stuff, but we ate it. It was still delicious.
Yeah.
And there's been years where I just don't, and I'm not trying to sound like that perfect, like well-behaved, you know,
but you do
fisherman there's so many times where I just won't go caribou hunting.
Yeah.
And I love going caribou hunting. I like the camaraderie. I like the experience. And there's just times, and my wife's looked at me and she's like, we don't need a caribou. You're going to go get a caribou? I'm like, yeah. She's like, we do not. We have so much caribou meat. Like, pump the brakes. And she's like, do something else. Finish building something you need.
Do something productive.
But it's hard to have self-control in those situations.
Well,
I think
that's a very good point. It is.
And what we've seen, honestly, in the last, I'm not even going to pretend to know how many years, decades could be, but we've seen a shift, right? And this is kind of where you see that split is what's the motivation? Is the motivation food procurement or is the motivation self-fulfillment?
Right.
Because you get a lot of guys that, whether it's fishing or hunting or anything else, they're doing it for the experience. They're doing it for the challenge, which is perfectly viable. Don't get me wrong. I'm not talking down on that. But whether or not they have meat already in the freezer that's enough to last the winter, whether or not they have no meat, that's not the contributing factor. The contributing factor is it's season. I want to hunt. I want to challenge myself to achieve this goal for my inner satisfaction. And that's why I'm going out and doing this. And it's not for a subsistence purpose. Right. Exactly. They're going to come home and grab McDonald's on the way home, which don't get me wrong, I do that too.
Guilty.
When it's 2 a.m.
Yeah, right.
But that's the difference you see there is, and again, I'm not talking down on that at all, but that is a difference in motivation from some people to others. Myself, and from the sounds of it, my motivation is meat. I'm out there for food.
Mine too.
Whether I'm fishing or hunting or whatever it is, if I've got half a moose left in the freezer, I'm not going moose hunting that year. And if I am, it's on proxy for somebody else.
Yeah, right.
Because
you can do a proxy. That would be a good thing to do.
And that's awesome. Don't get me wrong. Because I want to go moose hunting, like you said. Caribou hunting is awesome.
You can do a proxy for me.
Right? Yeah.
I'm all about it.
But
now I got a reason to go.
Yeah. But I think what you're seeing there is just that difference. Somebody wants to go dip netting because they enjoy dip netting. Oh, I don't want to skip dip netting just because I have fish in the freezer still. Let's find a place for that.
There are plenty of good places where people need food.
Oh yeah, well, you said, the food bank.
Yeah, the food. Yeah, if they can take frozen, they don't like to take frozen game or anything because it's not USDA. I think that's an issue.
Yeah,
which is very unfortunate. But there's plenty of places that will take it. I know a lot of like Fairbanks Native Association, I think, does take food for distribution, and so I think if they're filling up their freezers or not using their food, there should have enough consciousness to go. Let's donate. Find a place to donate, but don't waste it. I think the messaging that we need to give to everybody is just don't waste this resource, because when you get a hunting, when you go hunting, there's a limit, and you could be shut down. So if you get your limit and you still have plenty of caribou in the freezer and somebody else doesn't get one that needs it, you're taking that opportunity away. So I think if we can educate people to think about it in that way.
Right. Well, and that's what it boils down to is, whatever your motivation for hunting or fishing, it's a free country. Do what you want to do, right? Like nobody's talking down on what your motivation is. If you're out to challenge yourself or you're out to subsistence hunt. But regardless of your motivation, it's the ethics involved.
Yes, exactly.
That's the baseline.
And there is a lot of ethics in hunting. We all know that. All of us who've been hunting for a long time understand that there's an ethical issue here.
And I think that's where a lot of people find fault with what's going on with the fishing right now. It just seems like the ethics are tossed to the wind. They're
not. They are. Yeah. They are. And I don't think that's deliberate. I think it's just a byproduct of the situation. And there's no way to apply those ethics. If you are fishing on a huge pollock boat, for instance, or anything like that.
Right.
I mean, your responsibility is to the shareholders and the owners of that boat. It's not to the pollock and to itself,
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to. And that's why you have council, and that's why you have the Board of Fish. And that's why I'm a little worried about the Chevron doctrine, being, or anyway, that option being taken away. But the if we could just instill in people that there is ethics involved here and there is responsibility involved here.
Yeah. It's a limited resource that we all have to share.
Everything's limited.
Yeah.
And we do all have to share it. So we need to find ways to do that better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In your educated opinion, what's your optimism scale look like?
I tend to be a Pollyanna about everything. I know it's ridiculous. But you have to have a certain amount of that idealism in life in order to live.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to have a good feeling about the future for your kids and your grandkids and everybody else. And so I think the ship rights itself at some point, but it doesn't do it without hard work. It takes a lot of people talking and educating themselves and doing the hard work.
Yeah.
I'm going to liken it to the Dust Bowl days when we destroyed that particular environment out of sheer ignorance and arrogance.
Mm-hmm.
And we learned a very hard lesson, and it took us a very long time. But we learned it, and we learned how not, hopefully, to create more Dust Bowls. But I don't know if that's true or not. But we haven't had one. We haven't had one like the 30s. So maybe we did learn. I don't. Maybe that's a bad analogy. I don't know. But
time will tell.
Time will tell. If we bring the bison back, then bring the bison back. I was just watching a YouTube thing on the bison. There's a in western Texas and West Texas and Northwest Texas. There's a canyon up there. I can't think of the name. It'll come to me in a minute. Where they have bison, and it's sort of like a miniature Grand Canyon atmosphere. It's gorgeous there.
Mm-hmm.
You don't ever think of West Texas being like that, but it's in the northwest corner. And they've introduced a huge bison herd there. And they're doing a lot of research at the same time. They're discovering how important they are to the ecosystem there.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty cool.
It is pretty cool. Mm. I like seeing all that reintroduction stuff.
I do too.
Yeah, bringing everything back.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I'm so excited for that opportunity here in Alaska because, like we talked about before, they are indigenous here.
Yeah.
And it might not matter in our lifetime per se.
Right.
But maybe my kids or grandkids can go hunt bison.
Right.
Just on a harvest ticket, maybe.
On a harvest ticket, yeah.
Even on a draw system. I mean, there's certain herds you can do that with now, but I mean, if you could maybe get that bumped up to a registration tag or something like that with some bigger herd numbers or just multiple herds.
Right.
That would be some cool stuff.
It would be.
I don't know if wood bison get like the numbers that we have with the plains bison, like what I grew up with.
No, they don't.
They probably don't get that.
It's a food thing. It's the food availability. Yeah. And because plain bison, are grasslands and wood bison are not there.
Yeah.
But and also we were never in that kind.
Right.
But look at the herds of caribou we have, and we sustain those caribou herds. I mean,
it's true.
So we'll see.
What do those wood bison eat? Like, because you were talking about how they're not competitive to like other.
They don't do sun browns as moose or anything like that, but they eat shrubs and. I honestly don't know. You need to get the wood bison specialist in here.
You're just a wealth of knowledge. You don't know. If you don't ask, you don't know.
If it's not fishy, I'm getting a little trouble.
Right. I think I know where I might find that guy.
Yeah, yeah. I know where you can find him too. He's a good guy. And, yeah. And anyway, we talked about it at the AC, but we'll follow that. Actually, a close friend of mine is out helping. They have to build containments around the area that they're putting them in. So he's out helping with that.
I was just on a trip down to the peninsula, Kenai Peninsula. My wife and I went down there for our anniversary trip, and I actually stopped at that. What's it called? It's right outside Girdwood, the wildlife.
Oh yeah, the
refuge.
Refuge. Yeah,
right.
That place is cool.
It is cool.
Yeah,
it's really cool.
Yeah, they had a lot of bison there.
Yes, they do.
And elk.
Yeah. They have a lot of critters there.
Yeah. Bears, big old bears.
Yeah, big old bears. Right.
Human-fed bears.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right. Well,
not for reintroduction.
Speaking of sending your own meat, that's when I lived in Anchorage, and people were cleaning out their freezers. They would send them down to that.
Oh yeah.
Refuge.
Yeah. Yeah. They I think it was Steve Rinella described freezers as the delayed wanton waste machine.
Yeah,
yeah.
I was thinking something about that when you were talking earlier. Is that if we could apply a wanton waste principle, but we can't do that. But you're right.
Yeah. But no, it's.
But if you utilize it, I mean, if you do give it a good
exactly.
purpose, just don't throw it out.
Yep.
I remember years and years ago when we first came to Alaska, the Eielson Dump was the place where you'd get building materials. And a lot of our cabins were built from materials. I mean, military materials that were just perfectly fine,
Yep.
And then come caribou season, you'd find whole carcasses there.
Mm-hmm.
And if they weren't fly blown or anything like that, you could use them for dog meat, or some people used them for a lot of other things. But that's wanton waste, and of course it's illegal now, and they don't allow it in the military.
Right.
But
you still see it every once in a while on the transfer sites.
I
Unfortunately,
had a guy.
Yeah.
There was a guy on Facebook. He, this has been some years now, but he was, hey, I got, caribou scraps, bones, this and that, and I'm like, I'm gonna message this guy. I'm gonna grab this stuff, and for some other things, and I go to pick this stuff up, and there's just meat all over it.
Ooh.
And he's got it in tarps. There's 2 caribou, and I'm like, I can't take that.
Yeah.
And he's like, what do you mean? And I was like, this is, I'd pull that ad if I were you. Like,
I'm not taking your ticket.
Yep. I was like, I just, to help you out here a little bit. And I was like, this is a big issue. And he's like, I don't know what's going on here. And I broke it down.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, I think you've been misinformed somewhere along the way. And I was like, you do you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, wow.
And I mean, we're talking like the way we break stuff down.
Yeah.
I could have got 6 months of niblets out of those
Yep.
piles.
Yep.
I mean, I was just like, this is crazy.
You guys should teach classes in this, really, honestly.
We're working on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's why we do what we do.
Yeah.
I mean, it's,
Mhm.
and, and that's like, and I was one of those guys too. I remember I didn't really like sockeye when I moved to Alaska. And I'm like, I'm going to go dip net because my buddies go dip net.
Mhm.
I have all this sockeye in the freezer, and I'm like, yep, just sitting there. I remember like a couple of the neighbors one time, what are you doing with it? I don't know.
Yeah.
Can we clean this out? Can we take this? I mean, it's like
Yeah.
relatively like, fresh, but
Yeah.
and then I'm like, food's expensive, and come to my senses and have a family, and then you start looking at things differently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Different perspective on things.
Absolutely.
And I've been that dumb new Alaska guy.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of us.
Just,
Like, I was the same way.
I want to take
I think we all were.
Yeah.
take my picture of the inside of my freezer, and I'm cool, and then we're done.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep. Well, and a little bit of a plug here, but we kind of along the lines of classes.
Mhm.
We're working on doing some more ourselves. We had the bear bait clinic earlier this year.
Right.
Working on a few more that we're probably going to put on this winter for different topics. But we've been working recently with Mike Condis. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he started a nonprofit recently called the Alaska Outdoor Mentorship Program.
Oh.
And he's been meeting on base for the most part because he works on base.
And Wainwright or
Wainwright,
Osler?
yep.
Okay.
And he had a venue there on base, and he does once a month in-person classes. And it's really awesome. I've been to a few of them now, and there's a lot of attendance. And he's bringing in people. He had Al there the other night.
Oh, good.
Doing some talking on moose hunting and meat preservation in the field and getting things out of there. He's had people come in and talk about rafting trips and fishing and stuff like that, and regulations, how to read the regulations. Great stuff for the new folks coming to Alaska. And I think it's the fourth Tuesday of every month they meet. And from what it sounds like, he found an off-base venue to start hosting these things on.
Wonderful.
So it was just people that were able to get on base. And now it might be opened up to the entire community, which I think is awesome because there's a ton of people that would find value in that.
Why couldn't they use the Tanana Valley Sportsman's building?
The one off college?
One off university. When we have our we do the Laundry House Kings.
I don't know. I don't know if you looked into that one or not.
Yeah.
I'll have to ask him about that.
They have a big open area that would be ideal for classroom.
Yeah, he found one spot at I forget what the Morris Thompson Center, I think it is.
Yeah.
I think they offered him a spot.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know if that's going to be this month or going forward, or maybe it's going to fall through and I'm going to eat crow. But either way, that was the last update I got. So
we need a lot more of that.
Yeah, no, and he's a great dude. He loves teaching. He's got a huge heart for helping folks. So we're happy to support him, and I'll give him a plug on every episode we do.
Good.
I haven't heard what the topic for this month is going to be this next month, but as soon as I do, I'll put it in an episode. So,
well, if you shoot me any of that information, we can put it in the AC.
yeah,
too. We can have that discussion there.
Absolutely. I'll get you all that.
Okay.
But yeah, because it's super important for new folks coming here to know what's going on with the state, and it might seem silly, but even like you pointed out with the dip netting, take what you need, leave the rest. Let them spawn, let them create more.
No, that's the message.
You might think you're not making a big dent, but you combined with the other thousands of people going down
that's
there,
it.
It's accumulative.
There's a story, when because we have several villages, mini villages in the river, and people were saying, well, if we just took a few, people, but you start multiplying that.
Yeah.
And so people on the river are saying, wait a minute, let's do the math here, and we have a saying on the river that every fish counts.
Yeah.
And it does.
100%.
At this point, every fish counts.
100%.
So,
how many, I don't know if you know this, but it's a cool question to ask. How many salmon does one spawning salmon produce? Like,
well,
if it's all successful? There's
a ratio, and it used to be, and I'm going to say this wrong, so I'm not going to say it. but the ratio now is lower because the fish are smaller. There's fewer eggs. And so they call it recruitment.
Yes. Yeah.
So the recruitment level that you have for 2 spawning adults is a lot lower now than it was even 10 years ago. Because of that, and because of all the other issues that salmon have to go through. But on the spawning grounds itself, it's that with the fish getting smaller and the eggs getting fewer and smaller.
Sure. Yeah.
So.
Man.
And I don't know what that ratio is, and
right.
I do know that somebody that can tell you immediately, but I'm not that
person. Hey, I respect that answer so much. You have no idea. Well, do you have anything else you'd like to bring up as far as?
Well, I just want to say thank you very much for the opportunity.
Yeah.
And to the listeners out there, just ask questions, ask the right questions, and do your part. Like all things that we've been talking about, both for fish and game. We do have a shared resource in Alaska, and we need to protect it. And right now, our resource for salmon's in big trouble, and we need your help. So
yeah,
and it's not necessarily going to happen at Chitna, on the Copper River. They're relatively stable and healthy populations now, but other places that's not true at all.
Right.
So
before we wrap up, go ahead and maybe plug some resources that people can go to as far as getting involved with the fight or just getting educated.
I would start with your local AC.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely get that agenda and listen to us at the Fairbanks CC. We're pretty active. But there's plenty of sportsmen's groups. There are plenty of different places where you can Chitna netters, for instance. There's quite a number of groups out there. If you're there's a lot of tribal groups. And I know our group is on the AYK is invitational, but I'm willing, somebody wants to call me and we can work something out because we're very active, but we're not really an organization that's we are mostly discussion and information because we're just kind of a loose coalition.
Non-regulatory.
Yeah, non-regulatory, yeah. But definitely go to the Board of Fish meetings, go to the Board of Game meetings, RAC meetings. For we've got, go to the websites and put them into your calendar. I put out for the Fairbanks AC, I put out a fisheries calendar every month, and that's for the entire year. And that has all the key fisheries, everything, deadlines, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And but I think also university has a lot of really good resources. And the North Pacific Council has a lot of really good materials. They're structured different than the Board of Fish, but so they actually have a good archive of materials. So there's just ask around. Like what you guys are doing is fantastic because that's an outstanding educational tool. So
well, we do our best.
Yeah. So listen, learn. That's all any of us can do.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like with those resources, I mean, if you're really motivated to get involved and get educated, a 5-minute Google search and you'll probably find something.
Yes, I agree.
You just got to put a little bit of legwork in. So.
That's right. And I'll tell you, we need good people to get involved. It's just like, with anything. You need good people that are willing to be educated and to get involved in. And like you were saying earlier, when you get people together and they're just spouting opinions. I mean, honestly, we all have opinions about things.
Sure.
And it's really, and we get frustrated. And we need places to exercise our voice.
Mm-hmm.
So if you really want a good place to exercise your voice, get involved with these organizations,
Not your buddy's basement.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
A little verbal boxing ring.
Yeah. Well, it reminds me of the old fisherman on the dock. We can sit around and talk till the cows come home,
Yeah. Oh, man. Chris and I, we've solved the world's problems standing on opposite side of a truck bed from each other.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good point, though.
Could you imagine if we just drank?
Right. But it's important not to just talk to the choir.
Yes.
Yeah, it's important to get out of your comfort arenas and to talk with other people.
Yeah.
And to learn things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, on that topic, thank you so much for spending your evening with us and sharing all of your knowledge. It's been absolutely mind-blowing for me. I'm sure we've probably blown the minds of quite a few listeners too.
Yeah, I'm a little scared about that one.
Normally I say if you have any questions right into the show. I don't think I'm going to say that on this one. Right into Gale. She's the expert here.
Please don't.
Please don't.
Come to the AC meetings. We start in October.
Exactly.
So everybody's welcome. Thank you.
Yep.
And thank you. Thank you again.
Oh, of course. Yeah, no, it's been an absolute pleasure having you here.
For sure.
And those schedules for the ACs are very easy to find.
They are. Board of Fish website. Just type in Fairbanks Advisory Committee and you'll come up to their website. And that lists all the meetings that we've had in the past.
Mm-hmm.
There's minutes associated with each of the meetings, gives you the schedules, gives you what's on we have a 2-week notice period. We have to post it with the board and for the agenda items.
And one cool thing with those meetings too is they have all of the papers that you can pick up too.
Yes.
There's a whole table there typically.
Yeah.
Whatever the discussion topic is, whether it's bison, whether it's fish, whether it's whatever it is, there's like charts.
There are.
And
take-home literature.
Yeah, you can literally grab it and study it. It's awesome. I mean,
no, the agencies do a really good job bringing that information. And also, if there's anything anybody wants to know, they can just shoot us, an email, and we'll find it for them.
Mm-hmm. So, absolutely.
I'm glad to do that.
Perfect. Well, to everybody listening, thank you so much for hanging in on this one with us. Congratulations, Gale. You've officially gotten into the 3-hour club. So
wow.
Almost 3.5 hours.
Oh my gosh, I wasn't paying attention.
Didn't feel like it, did
it? You guys are
fun. We've been doing this a while. But thank you, everybody, for listening. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. This has been an absolutely amazing episode. If you support what we're doing, the easiest way to help us out is with a like and share on any of our social media stuff, a review and a rating on whatever platform you're listening to us on. 5 stars is always best, and a written review goes a long, long ways in helping push the show in front of new people with the algorithms and the way everything works. It's really the only means we have of pushing the show into a new audience. There's always a share button, too. If you have any friends that you think would be interested in the information we talked about in any of our episodes, you can share those directly through social media, our website, or on the app that you're listening. If you'd like to help us financially with pushing out some new products and new media, new greatness, we have our shop. If you go to thenorthernhunter.com, we have a shop page with some merch. We've got hats, hoodies, t-shirts, all of that. Kind of on this topic, one of our designs is a God Save the King hoodie.
Oh.
And that one is.
I want that one.
Yeah, we'll get you one. But that one's fresh for this summer. So keep, rock one of those and fight the fight. So we've also got a partners page with a lot of companies that have decided they like what we're doing and they want to help us out. So there's links and discount codes with those companies. If you use the discount codes, you'll obviously get a discount. And it helps us out as well. A lot of them some are big companies, some are little companies. But they're all hunting oriented, outdoors oriented. They're going to get you out there, help you have great success. And again, if you have any questions, go to the AC. We have a contact button on the website, and you can write into the socials. But I don't think I'm going to be much help on this episode. So, but we can get you in contact with the people who will be. So find them and get you all the answers. So, Gale, thank you once again. This has been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Chris, for hanging in. And
my pleasure.
Yeah.
To all our listeners, until next week, get out there, get after it, and good luck. We'll see you around.